All set? Okay. Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. This is Tuesday, December 17, last meeting of 2019. And first matter, actually, before we call the first thing on the agenda, is to make a special announcement that this is Sheila's last meeting with us. I don't know if she's really made it public or not, very public, but she is escaping, leaving us. Anyway, I just wanted to recognize that. I think the plan is that we would like to see you again in January. We'll do something special for you at that time where you can tell us exactly what you think. About anything off the record without minutes, and it's about time. But on my part at least, I'll miss all our conversations that we've had over the years. Sheila and I've had some nice private conversations, business conversations about the board. And I know you've served for 10 years and you've had it, that's about it. I've tried to coax Sheila to stay on even longer, but apparently I have no charm left whatsoever. That didn't work at all. But I think on behalf of the board, and certainly for myself, thank you very much for all your service. So conscientious, so meticulous, and so measured, which I think the measured part is really important for us. You have really kept us in check from time to time where it's like, guys, and I for one really appreciate that. So before I start making a mess up here, a wetland that will have to be determined by Dennis here. Thank you very much, and we look forward to you in your free life and coming back to us, and we'll do something in January. So thank you very much.
Well, thank all of you very much. It's been a real privilege. It's been a lot of fun, and there's been so much camaraderie to work with such talented and dedicated and wonderful people, and I will miss it, and I'll think about you on Tuesday nights.
Will you watch us?
With a glass of wine in my hand.
Well, you can text Sabrina, tell her to move the microphone, I can't hear him.
That could double our viewership. Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you, Sheila. Yeah, it's really been terrific. And
It's been for me too.
so, I'm sort of expecting Tom to show up. Just so you know, I mean, again, in terms of dedication of folks on this board, notwithstanding the huge pay we get, Tom is actually gonna try to make it here. He's been in Phelps the last 5 days with a problem. But I've talked to him and Les talked to him during the day, and I think he's gonna still try to make it here.
He should stay home.
Yes. So, well, he's coming to make sure he's correcting me, so he's got all the incentive in the world, so it's good. Anyway, our first matter, we have some work to do this evening, so that we can work with the town board. The town board will be, I'm sure, waiting for us to do certain things that we are required under the code to do before they can take action on some of the issues that are before them on the chapter 4 process. So the first item, though, is, before we get to that, is proposed local law. This is on the moratorium. So the town board has proposed extending the moratorium another, is it 6 months?
Yes.
Right?
Yes, 6 months.
Another 6 months, and we did find that this is something that is not limited by the number of extensions. So it's perfectly fine, we clarified that a while ago. So what the town board is asking us to do is just to opine on, the appropriateness of that extension. And if anyone has any issues or questions, we should raise it now, but if not, I think they're waiting for us to say that we concur with the proposal.
If I may, Bob?
Sure, absolutely.
You had before, you had, either before you may have received it via email, a draft letter from the planning board to the town board, kind of supporting the moratorium. In front of you, we also included your comments last time.
Right.
This was before
Right.
you, and some of your comments were incorporated into the local law. This was at the beginning, before they started extending the moratorium. And so we just wanted to bring your point of reference back, some of your comments were incorporated, others were not incorporated, but the law is as you referenced it and commented on it, this is just an extension, there's no new conditions or language being added into the moratorium. It's just a continuation because the town board is at the point of reviewing draft code, draft legislation for the form-based code, which will then be put through a generic environmental impact statement. And that is underway as of January. They will establish lead agency on the action of the local law, and there will be a public scoping process for the GEIS. And that's the process, that's why we need the additional time so that the law can be refined based on the environmental impacts.
And so the proposal, I think, is to extend it to June 15, 2020, an additional 6 months.
Now, and this date will change based on the filing of the local law. So the 6 months will begin to toll once it is filed with New York State.
Okay. Great. Any thoughts, questions, issues? I guess what we could do is basically,
Review this letter and either change it or agree to it.
yeah, I mean, the only changes would be any of those things that they've already adopted, right?
Well, we wouldn't, this letter, they're not asking
Oh, I see, yeah, yeah.
for comments, this was
Right.
just for your information. But the letter that's written, it says pursuant to the referral,
Right.
extending, please be advised, the planning board has no objection to the extension, unless you have additional comments.
Right.
Okay.
So is there a motion to approve the, this memo going to the town board?
Motion?
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
And so if you will, Felicia is going to finalize that and then deliver it.
Just the date, right, is all we need?
Just the date, yes.
Point of order, did we open the meeting? Did I miss that?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't hear it.
Okay. The next item on our agenda is the continued discussion, this is the referral from the town board regarding the petition of SG Chapter B LLC for amendments to the zoning code of the town of Newcastle, the preliminary development concept plans of the Chapter Park Crossing project affecting real property owned by the petitioner located 480 Bedford Road. And, well, we have the tax law codes, that's fine. We've been through this enough, we know where it is. The applicant and staff and the attorneys have been working on this draft of the memo for a couple of days now. And the thrust of it, I mean, from my perspective was, you know, to some of the things we weren't quite ready to pull the trigger on in terms of the site approval, and this stuff will still be coming back to us on the site approval. So this was just a, you know, I guess, what would you call it, what's the 40,000 foot over, you know, sense of the various changes that are before us and before the town board, and that we were supporting those changes that we talked about many times now, the zoning code, and then some of the other changes to the PDCP.
I think this was written, everyone should be aware that this was written based upon the plan that had initially accompanied the petition and that had been reviewed by the planning board over a period of time and included certain elements, including raising the loop road. And that's what this memo is based on. Since then, there have been some further review of alternatives in connection with the loop, not raising the loop road, and also in connection with relocation of a unit to address an issue that was raised by someone from Cowden Lane. So this memo hasn't yet caught up to that. It doesn't encompass the discussion of the alternatives. It presumes that the planning board was supporting the raised loop road, which they had discussed for months, and was not addressing any change in units at this time, since that had not been presented to them in any great detail, other than at the last meeting, the resident came and explained their position. So, with that background, the board should understand that the town board has draft finding statement before them, which does address the subject of an alternative for the loop road, discusses that it not be raised, outlines the impacts of not raising it versus the impacts of raising it. And the finding statement ultimately determines that neither alternative will result in a significant adverse environmental impact, so that'll satisfy their seeker requirements, but they are going to defer the ultimate determination of whether that loop road should be raised and all the associated issues that go with that in terms of the construction phasing and the cut and fill balance would be deferred to the planning board as part of its site plan review. It appears with respect to the relocation of a single unit that the revised PDCP has been presented to the town board. I don't know if we've seen it, but includes that change that the board in their draft resolution is apparently going to approve that as part of the amended PDCP. Those, from my knowledge, are the two significant changes, but I'll defer to Sabrina and also any information from the applicant if there are additional matters.
Right,
that,
and I think that
the planning board should be brought up to speed on.
Right, I think the change in the building that's being proposed or being considered is that building U, the one way out there towards
Building the
Calvert.
last unit that's closest to the neighbors is being brought towards the middle of that row
Right.
of building, and it's just being reorganized.
Right.
So it creates more distance with the neighbor there. That seems to be satisfactory both to the neighbor who sent an email in, as we understand it, as well as to the town board in the discussion. So that seems to be something that they're willing to support at this point.
Does that small building with I don't know what the width of it is, 25 feet? 30 feet? Does that really change the sight lines? I mean, what you see in the sight lines? Did anyone do any sight
Yes,
lines
we
that
did.
show?
We actually-
What I've seen, it doesn't make any difference.
We did visual impact, it does move it about 30 feet over, and the neighbor seems to be satisfied, and I think the town board is satisfied that the neighbor is satisfied. We're willing to do it, so there's just I think there's no reason not to.
Well, I think one of the issues when we looked at it, and I thought that the memo, the cover note from Andy's firm indicated that they thought that the benefits were very, very marginal, that extra 30 feet or so. But one of the issues, and I'm not quite sure what those impacts are, there was a mention from the memo that there was going to have to be a retaining wall, 9-foot retaining wall, and that the spacing between some of the units along that roadway would have to be narrowed to make up for the
Right, so
space.
there were two alternatives that were studied based on what the town board had asked.
Matt, can you introduce yourself,
Yeah, sorry,
please?
Matt Steinberg with Tiffany Tongue Schwalbe. So the building U relocation was the end unit, the northernmost unit was being relocated, as Mark had mentioned, to one of the, we're essentially switching a 3 and a 4.
Do you guys have a map?
I do, I mean.
Cause you can
I-
stick it
I-
into this computer and then it'll show up here. It might be easier to explain it. See how fancy we are,
I'm impressed.
right? We had this oiled perfection.
So this is an overlay that shows, you can see in blue, the one that actually is not shaded is the site plan that we had previously shown to the planning board. Relocating this one unit sort of inboard along Road E, essentially it moves that building essentially 30 feet further south by doing that. All these buildings, they do shift a little bit. There are 17 feet between them, which is consistent with the distance between units. For instance, up here on Road F, there are buildings that are that close. So we made sure that we were consistent with other spacing of townhome buildings elsewhere on the site. This move would actually make building U not only further than the plan that you have been reviewing, but it actually moves a little further away than what the 2015 approved PDCP had for a building. So Yes, so visual standpoint, they're still looking at that building, it is now a little further away, there's a little more opportunity to, when we look at the landscape plan, to maybe shift some trees around, stagger them a little bit more. So there, there are opportunities to take, take advantage of that benefit by moving that unit. And that roadway, the roadway E could be shortened a little bit, which has a little retaining wall. The retaining wall that you were referring to, Mr. Chairman, is we had done a study on rotating Road H away. That one would have required a
That's not no longer on the table though, right? The rotation of the road, that wasn't part of what you discussed with the town board, correct?
This was presented to the town board.
We discussed it
the last
and
meeting.
it's no longer included, but it was asked, you asked about it, so we'll just show you why they rejected it.
Right.
They said it was an idea, we studied it because we were requested to, but it was determined not to go forward with it.
Okay,
Right.
good.
Right, and that one would have required a wall, which is one of the reasons why we
Right.
we had said first the
Great, great, okay, thank you. So, one of the issues that I thought was important, and speaking less in terms of the loop road, was there was some issue and concern with regard to some of the details. And we are really not looking at those details at this point, so it seems to me that we're doing this really kind of on a quasi-generic basis for the town board to say, we think that either of these could work, and assuming that that the applicant complies with the town engineer's requirements in terms of zero on cut and fill on each phase, and going through all the phases, and we talked about landscaping the phases, et cetera. Assuming that, we felt that it could be something that would not have any kind of adverse environmental impact. So the issue, I think, for us was to retain those kinds of discretionary review areas for the site plan. And but at the same token, we should go through that portion of the memo to make sure that people are okay with it, and on our recommendation to the town board. But that was the thrust of it, to leave that issue open, because there are benefits, cost benefits with each one, but in each case it would have to be studied, I think, very thoroughly in terms of, the concerns that we raised in the last couple of meetings with regard to the phasing.
I'm curious, how is the storage times for cut being handled in all this? I know I saw the one set of approaches says, okay, in each of the 5 phases, by the time we're finished, cut will balance with the fill. But there is, if I understand correctly, a time limit on how long fill can stay on the property, or do I have that wrong?
I don't know if there's a time limit other than what we would obviously review with the town engineer.
Yeah, there's no time limit on the fill.
Okay, so can it stay
It
for a
should be
long time?
stabilized at all times, because then it could be a problem with DEC.
Right, and this phasing plan has been, we went back based on the planning board's comments and worked with Toll Brothers to look at a phasing plan that at the end of each phase, there would be more balance, or essentially a balance at the end of each phase, as opposed to what you had seen before, which was kind of a global
Okay.
balance.
End of the project, right.
I have a question about that particular point. So at the end of each phase, during that phase, there will be cut that will be stockpiled somewhere. And then as the project for that phase goes forward, that stockpile will be used for fill, and it will be balanced out at the end of that
I would
phase.
imagine it could be either used for fill for that particular phase, or would be used subsequently to the next phase.
Well, that's an important.
I'll defer to them on that.
Can you
Basic effort
identify?
with Toll Brothers.
I'll defer to them on that, explain that.
Yeah, so the intent is to cut the material, put it into a truck, and then truck it to a fill area and compact it directly in place. We're not looking to stockpile
Okay.
any material.
So you're moving it within, you're essentially moving it
Yes.
within the confines of that particular phase.
Correct. Yeah, we worked hard to come up with a phasing plan, we ended up with 5 sub-phases
Yeah,
that are
right.
below 5 acres.
Right.
And that each balance from a cut to a fill.
So at the end of each phase, everything will be balanced before you open the earth on the next phase?
That's correct.
And it seems to me that what we would do is, as we go through this, that would be one of the conditions that we would set forth in our document, in the approval for the site plan.
Of course.
Yeah, you can go into more detail.
Yeah, of course, of
when-
course.
Yeah.
And I think, cause Tom raised this once before, how this also dovetails with the planting plan, the landscape plan, because that really hasn't been looked at in detail in conjunction with the phasing at this point, so it's something that really has to be coordinated to make any kind of sense.
And I think the best way to look at it, I did anyway, when I reviewed it, is to make certain when they're done with one phase, we can't assume, even though I wanna see it done in a timely manner, that the next phase is gonna be done right away. So you have to assume each phase is self-sustainable, with all the drainage, all the utilities, and with the plantings as well.
And the
Something to
remaining-
keep in mind,
And the remaining of the site is left alone
That is
and
correct.
maintained.
that is key, that is critical,
So there's smaller projects that build their way up.
that is correct.
So
I
could
think it's the best way to manage the stormwater and the erosion control.
Could you guys put up those, the drawing packet we got that has the detail on the 5 phases?
The colored one?
Yeah. It'd be good that we sort of all look at this while we guide some
Do
decisions.
you want the overall, or would you like to see
You could just pick one of them, it doesn't matter, pick phase 3 if you want. If you have that isolated, the, essentially the grading plan. Okay, so it's hard to read at this scale. I'd like to be able to look at a larger scale, or go to phase 4, is it? Sorry.
But one of my comments, when they do submit final to look at, they be on each sheet at a maximum scale 1 to 30.
That'd be
Because
very
when you look at it 1 to 60, it's kind of tough to pick
Right.
up the nuances.
Right, exactly.
correct, and this was, we did this at this scale, cause this is what the PDCP plan was, so we tried to keep the same scale, you would see the entire site.
Right, that's fair.
Obviously, when we come back to your board, you had seen a plan that was split into 2 sheets, and we would do the same.
Can
there-
you zoom into
Yeah.
into a section for him?
Yeah, exactly. I guess it's phase 4, which is, got the gray area on that drawing. I'm sorry, yeah, phase 4. Just zoom way in if you can, far enough so we can see the topography. Ah, yeah, that's real good. Back it out a little bit. Yeah, that's too good.
Yeah.
Zoom only works in certain.
Right there, stop.
That good?
Yeah, no.
That's good stuff. No, come on,
Sorry.
go back a little bit. Dad!
It's okay. Actually, that's hard to say, I can't,
Do you wanna move in a little bit?
yeah, sorry.
Sure, no,
We should have given you a mouse.
It's gonna be, we spend the next 15 minutes just trying to get this drawing.
Like taking an eye exam with the lenses.
That's a good strategy. Yeah, there you go, good deal.
That works.
No, not there. Well, that's where the,
You went phase 3.
Yeah, that's 4.
That's phase 4.
phase 4.
Then you want to see 4?
let me show you the drawing I'd like. This is the good. In this phase, what you're doing, what are those hashed areas? That's road, right? Future road.
yes, correct, those are future roads.
Let me get the drawing, I'm sorry,
And those will act as construction parking.
Let me get the drawings out, I can really focus on the part of this that.
Look at this screen, it might be easier.
Do I have a question? Oops. That was not intentional, guys.
Ask him if you just looked at that.
Oh, yeah. Tom, do you wanna look at the
Does it
screen?
help you if you look at this? It's got it just like that on the screen.
That might be helpful, but I'm into this right now, so if you guys just look at the picture. Just take a second. Okay, this sheet I have, it looks like this. Is that the one we're looking at there?
Yes, this is, right, this is zoomed into
Okay,
page.
can you zoom in more, because it's hard to see the topo right now. Good stuff. And shift the whole image to the left a little bit. A little more, a little more, a little more. Keep going, keep going. Stop. I guess I'm not seeing what. I'm sorry, shift it to the right? I'm not seeing what you're seeing, except that, okay, I see, the lines have a different line density up there than they do here.
Right,
So
they're
it's
a
the same
little-
drawing.
Yes, it is, it's just
So,
print version.
there's a, is there a pointer here somewhere?
Yeah, you should have a pointer there.
Sorry, great.
Where is it all?
So if you help me figure this out, if this is the road, right?
The future road, yes.
Future road. And in this phase, you are going to, you grade this road out, and these are the finished grades for that road? Here,
Well, during that phase, we would
grade to this road.
eventually grade to that road.
Right, and so, here there is a drop in elevation, or it goes up from here to here. Either goes up or down. Over here, so this is essentially a curve here,
Yeah,
right?
that's a curve right there, that's the deal.
Right.
That's why it goes along the curve.
Right, and so this is curb height here, and then it cuts across here, it goes to here, and these are 2-foot contours? The dark ones?
The dark ones or the 10
contours.
feet? 10 feet.
These are 10-foot contours.
Sorry, the dark, no, the dark are,
One's a 10,
the
but
dark are
others
two.
are 2 for
The dark
Tom.
are two.
Are those existing contours?
Proposed, it should be existing.
No, the light dashed are the existing contours.
Yeah, usually light dash are existing.
Right.
So there are a number of contours here that just aren't resolved in this drawing. But this is, what's represented here in these contours, this is the proposed contour. I don't know whether this moves to here or that moves to there, but then this is the proposed contour to essentially prepare this part of the site for development, right?
Correct.
Essentially rough grading, right?
Correct, yes, and obviously these would be the eventual footprints of the buildings would be in this.
Would be in
this
here.
box, yes.
Right. So if this is proposed to be essentially the finished grade at this point, and this is a point where I think there's like buildings here and buildings here, so this is sort of the space between the two building blocks. So there are buildings here and then buildings here. And so this is one end of that essentially rough pad, and the other end of that rough pad is over here. These contours that come through here, they don't seem to change elevation from the proposed road through the site to the other side. Essentially, I mean, they're moved a little bit because you have to do a curve. But essentially, the elevation of this pad is approximately the same elevation of the new road, and I guess approximately the same elevation of the future road over here, alley or whatever we're calling it, over here. So this is essentially a piece of property which is sloped, but it's essentially one plane that goes from low to high
Yeah, that's.
in rough grading.
Yeah, and this isn't depicting it correctly. With this submission, we did provide what we refer to as a padding plan, which is that interim grade that you're talking about between the two roads on all the building pads. And essentially, how that's rough graded is, and
that particular instance, you have a road on either side of the building.
Right.
So, the rough grade would be a 10-foot flat shoulder, and all our utilities would be stubbed, essentially 10 feet behind the curb.
I'm sorry, explain the 10-foot flat shoulder, what's that mean?
It's basically a flat area behind the curb.
Okay.
So there'd be a 10-foot flat area, we call it a shoulder,
And the
along the
utilities
road.
stub out of that?
And the utilities would be stubbed at that line, so there's a connection for water, sewer, drainage, gas, electric. Once we get past the 10-foot shoulder, there's a grade change, and we slope downward and leave that pad lower.
So that's not represented in this drawing?
It is represented, and
Not
Matt's
this
got it
drawing,
up
is it?
right now. Yeah, it's, for some reason, and maybe it just didn't make it to this set of plans, but this is the interim grading, and if you zoom out, it's an actual grading plan that was submitted that has all the design grades.
Right, it's at the end of the.
Yeah, so,
Okay, good, very good.
and we can zoom into that area if that helps.
Should be at the very end of the set.
Right,
Great,
this
got
is it, yep.
So, okay, so could you go back to that section again, please?
Yeah,
I'm just trying to understand how this works. So, at the end of the rough grading, and at that point, you pretty much have balanced all your cut and fill,
correct,
and then you're just gonna insert the buildings in these holes.
correct. So you'll have, instead of a 7.5-foot excavation to the bottom of the basement, you will have, on average, 4 feet of excavation. And the material coming out of the excavation for the basement is used as backfill around the building. And we do that so all the building pads balance.
Okay.
There was a concern at the last meeting that, you know, this is all gonna be excess material, or we're gonna stockpile it. And this is how we develop our site, so
That's
we're
how you
not
develop.
managing that material beyond.
That's how you develop the zero balance.
That's correct, right.
Well,
Genius.
Well, I understand how, that's how you develop the zero balance for this dirt, right? But this dirt,
Well,
where is that dirt put back in fill?
that's not dirt, so,
Well, it is dirt, it's dirt now,
no, so
because this is your.
if I could see that pointer. So this is the 10-foot shoulder,
Right,
and then we're sloping down. So
Yeah,
the
but-
interim grade slopes down to this elevation and back up. So
yeah, but that's excavation.
that is excavation,
Right.
but that is done with the road work and the utility work. So all that excavation is done,
I understand,
is what we call mass grading, so when we
I
dig a
understand
building,
all that.
it's just this material that comes out
But-
and is used around the building.
So, but, okay, so going back to this, when I say this dirt, this used to be dirt, but you excavated.
Well, not necessarily, it depends if you're in a
Well, I
cut or
just-
fill on the site.
Well, I just looked at that particular site, and essentially, I mean, all you're doing is moving the grades one way or another, you actually aren't, you're just straightening out the grades.
But,
and-
but I think you have to look at that over the existing grade.
I did. So, let me just sort of finish my point,
Okay.
and then we can, you can help me out.
Yeah.
So, if this excavation is used to help sort of backfill, right? Because this is 2-to-1 slope, so it's
Correct.
stabilized, right?
Yep,
And during construction, you can get in there without having to put sheet pilings in it or anything. So, but this dirt here, I still don't understand where that dirt goes after you build the building.
that's not dirt that needs to be excavated
No, but
At what point is
What-
that area excavated?
through the mass grading, through the
And where's
phasing.
it put?
And what
Where does it
happens
go?
to the soil during mass grading?
where does it go?
It's either in a cut or a fill.
And that's where they balance.
So
Yeah.
this is,
So they're
this
dynamically
is,
grading.
this is finished grade. So what I'm looking at is finished grade in the pad. So existing grade's not represented on the plan, right? So existing grade could be all the way down here, and we would need to then fill to achieve this profile. Or existing grade could be up here, and we would need to cut to achieve this profile. So there are areas of cut and there's areas of fill. What we're representing here is when the road is finished and the lots are prepared and rough graded, this is what it's gonna look like. And then when a home is sold and we need to dig a basement, this is the only material coming out of the excavation of the basement and being used around the unit. So that's what this section's representing.
But so Tom, I think to answer your, James Fitzpatrick with Toll Brothers, so if that were theoretically a full cut building, right? Where you had to cut the full depth of the basement.
Right.
So the initial cut that got you to the padding plan, that material that was removed from that boxed white area there would be placed in a fill area within that same phase.
Exactly.
Right.
Likely
So whether
that
it-
phase of
it
the
could be a
berm.
berm, it could be
Right.
a lower foundation within the same phase, so that's what we looked at, that was the exercise, and how do we create not only areas in the site that have phases that balance, but also the interim grading plan that leaves us material within the building pad itself that will balance itself when the building constructed.
I understand, and that would be the objective,
Yep.
right? But I can't find, for instance, in this phase, I can't find areas of fill in this general
In phase
area
4, can you pull up the cut and fill map?
that account for that much cut. I just don't see it within that phase.
Casey, can I, while Matt's looking for that, can I interject with another question?
Sure.
When you do your mass grading and your cutting and your filling, and you have your pad area for your buildings, what is the time frame within which those pads typically fill out within each of your sections? Do you have an estimate?
During home construction, each of the pads are designed to balance each of the buildings. So each excavation of the basement, that material is gonna be used around that particular
No,
building.
I understand that, but prior to excavating that basement and putting the basement form in,
Right.
you will have an area that's gonna be cut.
Right.
How long is
Okay,
it gonna
so at
take
those
to-
areas,
Yeah,
you will have, if you're doing a phase, how large is that phase, how many of those cuts do you have in that phase?
Yeah.
And how much time does it take from when you establish that mass grading with the cuts, and you filled elsewhere, cause you're balancing, how much time does it take typically to fill each of those cuts with a dwelling?
sure, we typically like to have somewhere between 12 and 18 months of site, of lots out ahead of, home sales, right? So we wanna know that we have about 12 months of inventory of sales, of improvements in front of us, so we know we can very clearly, when someone purchases a home from us, we can give them a very clear or a more accurate delivery date, because we have this work already done out in front of us.
Okay.
That said, we also looked at, because there was a concern about, well, what happens if the world blows up, right?
Yeah.
And the job is, so we looked at also kind of cutting the job into two pieces. Where, you guys can jump in and correct me if I got my phases wrong, I think it was phases 1 through 3. So 1
Yes.
through 3 got us essentially half of the units, about 40 to 45 units. The loop road, theoretically, if the loop road is gonna be done, the basin that has to be constructed off-site, as well as the clubhouse. So we were, what we had represented in our narrative was that, look, we looked at this job as like a front and a back also, and we want, and it also got us the berm too, correct?
Yes.
So everything that we had,
Loop
that we
road, the
knew,
berm.
things that were like public facing, right, on the perimeter, to get our basin done, to get the loop road done, to get the amenity built, and to get the berm constructed. We incorporated that into the first half of our phasing. And like we had represented a number of times in the past, we're a very cash flow sensitive company. We just don't build houses assuming people are gonna buy our houses. We don't put improvements in the ground assuming that, we're gonna need 40 lots in front of us when our sales pace has been 25, right? So we make those educated business decisions. So that's how we looked at the job. So we would essentially get, look at our phasing, almost take a breath after phase 3 to kind of see, what's our sales activity been? Do we need to push ahead into phases 4 and 5, or do we pause? And that's just a business decision that we would just make as a company, but now we've incorporated it into the phasing plan. So when we would like to make that decision in the future, we now have a phasing plan that allows us to do that.
So you
But do we have a sense of what the phasing plan is in terms of your market needs? So when we talked about you would like to have an inventory available, at least staged, do we have an idea what that might be? And again, to Sabrina's point, again, the timing on it, assuming, you know, the world does not fall apart, but that you just, you know, progress and go through a normal development here.
Yeah, so this is broken into 5 total phases.
These are 5 sub-phases.
Yeah, so we're roughly around, 20 plus units, per phase, a little less than that. Our front half over the 3 phases, we have 45 units roughly. So you figure you're somewhere between, 15 and 18 units per phase.
Would
something
it
like
make
that.
more sense to build out all the building units in each phase, or you don't plan on doing that at all?
No, that's not how they do it.
How
You're not
so?
gonna do it. So you're not gonna build out all the building units in each phase. You're gonna do it in the third phase and see what you have.
No, so we've also, we looked at the programming of the site too, and how we would, our phase 1 corresponds with where we wanna start, and our phase 2 corresponds with where we believe we're gonna go to next, and 3 and 4 and 5.
No, but if phase 1 has, I'm just using a number, has 20 units,
Oh,
are you
sure,
gonna
yeah,
build
bring
all
up-
those 20 units?
Yeah, so what we also looked at, if you wanna bring up, maybe a site plan or something, maybe the color phasing plan would be easier. We like to have a balance within the site, it's, two plans. So if you look at we're looking at the blue, the green, and the yellow, for our initial front half of the job. So what that also now gives us, is that gives us a good spread of units, for people who are looking for maybe different things within the community, right? You're gonna have some stuff that's very up, closer to the retail. You're gonna have some units in the yellow that back up to a little bit more of a private, setting because they're backing up to the open space. You have some units in the green that are, or the blue that may be on the, facing the roadway. So what that allows us to do is now within this same phase, even if we're marketing, arguably the same home types, the same maybe 4 or 5 home types, there are different values that you put on those home sites depending on where they are. So now we have a good kind of blend of units within that front half of the project, so we can market different home site premiums, different home styles, to different customers.
Well, this has helped me. I appreciate, that there is gonna be some controls, although they're a little murky yet, as to how it works within each phase. I have some confidence that the cut and fill will be balanced. There won't be moving off even the area, probably most of it, except for the phase 1C, where I'm not sure what's happening there. So that's good. But when I look at this, it just dawned on me that from the cross-section you had of the building with the 2 triangles and the square at the bottom, are there gonna be any windows in these basements? I mean, I can see on the two long sides of buildings that are right next to each other, there wouldn't be any windows on the long side because you'd be looking into the neighboring property. There's not a walk space between each house, is there?
Yeah, code requires there to be an egress window in even unfinished basements. That's, that was adopted in the last round of the residential code, so yeah. So every home will have, a means of egress, a second means of egress from their basement, other than the steps up to the home.
Okay, but it's gonna be limited in windows in the basement,
Yeah,
which
you're gonna have, we've accomplished them using, single casement windows, you kind of build out a little.
oh, so they would be up high and like this.
A little, yeah, there's mostly such.
Window wells.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So could you go back now to, the drawings we were looking at before? That section was really helpful, I didn't see that before. It's very helpful, but I still have a question here.
Sure, actually I can bring up. This graphic where people had
Yeah,
helped
so
develop.
this is a cut to fill map, so the blue is a fill and the red is a cut. And the intensity are degrees of cut, degrees of fill.
So could we go to the plan that we were looking at for phase 4 for a second? Yeah, that's good. Now, if you zoom out, how many units are we talking about in this phase? I'm just trying to see. Phase 4, there are 20 24, 20, 21, 22 units, something like that, I think, in this phase. And so if there are, just call it 20 units, and each of these cuts that are put there for the basements are, I'm just gonna use a round number, 1,000 square feet. That's 20,000 square feet in plan, and you said they're 7 feet deep, 6 feet deep. So that's 20,000 times 6, that's 120,000 cubic feet. What is that? Is that 100 cubic yards?
Was it 120 or?
So what is it?
20,000?
Divided by 27.
120,000 divided by 27.
My calculator works. Yeah, battery.
You wanna use my phone?
120? Yeah, right.
Yeah, your phone has better math.
You got 120? 120,000 divided by 27?
120,000 cubic.
Yeah.
That's 4,444.
Okay, so we got 4,500 cubic yards. Yards, right? I don't see anywhere in this plan, maybe you can point it out to me, where there's 4,500 yards of fill in this plan.
I would go to the cut and fill map.
This is the one I'm referring to.
Yeah, I think it's represented well on this map, so, I know the limits aren't shown exactly.
I'd like to see the contour map. I mean, go ahead and show us this.
But, so I think what you're seeing is the road, I don't know if you have the pointer. So this road, you know, this is a fill, right?
But that's not in this phase.
Well, some of it is, right?
Yeah, just some tiny bit of it.
Yeah, this is in that phase.
That is, right, that.
Fill area is in that phase.
Here, let me try. Okay. The drawing I'm looking at, it looks like it's about a 20-foot offset from the road is in this phase, so I think it's sort of right around in here.
Yeah, that's accurate.
And,
But you'll see that the buildings further down the line, you know, this looks like a full excavation, that unit, right? This looks like half of the 7-foot excavation. This looks like half, and then it transitions to where some of these buildings are fills. Some of these buildings, there's no excavation,
how can that be?
because
Yeah, do they have- do they
the
have-
existing grade is lower than the design grade.
Do they have basements?
Yes,
So the existing grade is 10 feet lower?
yeah, in some
Then this
cases
is
it
high
is,
grade.
and this
Right,
area
if you
is.
recall, there's sort
there's
of
a
a ridge
lot of
that
fill
runs
down
down
there.
that,
Yeah.
across this whole site, and we're essentially pivoting up the corner, yeah.
So just a couple more minutes, so I can get this right. So in the phase 4, that's not indicative of the phases, let me try this. Phase 4, if this is where the Performing Arts Center is,
Right,
phase 4 actually starts right about here and goes up and wraps
that's
around.
correct.
And so you're saying for the lower end of this, this is actually filled because there's no cut required to build those
Yeah,
basements?
some of them are filled, some of them are at grade, and then gradually get into a more intense cut as you go north.
And that's why on the backside of Chappaqua, the Performing Arts Center, there's actually a fill slope that goes down
That's correct.
back there.
It looks like there's a lot of fill back here to build out this.
There is, that road is largely
Yeah, that's a
fill.
different, that's a different phase.
I mean, it's a different phase, but.
Right, okay, so now let's go back to my final question. When you excavate for these basements, go back to the section now, just for a second. Okay, again, the dirt that comes out of here is, again, you're saying that it goes in to fill for the grading for the rest of the site? Or the rest of the phase?
In some cases.
And in other cases,
Yeah.
it is stockpiled somewhere?
We're not stockpiling. So when we looked at those buildings that were blue, right? that grade, existing grade is all the way, it's below the bottom of the foundation. So there was no excavation of the foundation. What we would do in that instance while we're building the road
So you're saying-
is actually do this and fill.
So you're saying
This
there's,
would be a fill in that case,
so you're saying there's actually less of this dirt that I'm talking about
yes,
than I'm assuming?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not a straightforward calculation
Okay.
of volume basement.
Okay, good, thank you.
I think the takeaway on this is that we have, when we look at this later on, we'll be looking at, obviously, Bob's got the rules and regulations, which you know about the 5 acres at any one given time. The cut and fill will have to match, but also, I mean, we'll look at each phase very carefully with you to make sure it all works out. And the other issue that's not even in here yet is the landscape plan too, as you backfill and you build out these areas.
Just to make it clear that the planning board deliverable tonight is only a referral memo, it is not approving any plans tonight.
Right.
No, I understand
No,
that.
I'm just making sure everybody.
Right, but the point of my
No, I
question.
just want
just
to
so I
make
can
sure
say-
everybody understands that we're not.
Right.
Nothing, even if we're saying, okay, it looks okay, we're not saying.
That we're approving, right.
Right.
Exactly.
One point I'm making.
Thank you.
And nor is anyone taking that as an approval at this point. Right? The town board is not either, just is very generic in terms of zoning, yeah.
The point of my questions was to be sure that our referral memo is accurate with respect
Yes.
to what's in the documents.
But I think it's also very fair to let the applicant know that this is what we'll be looking for when we do the site plan approval.
I tried to make all that clear in my memo too.
Yes.
That I sent to them
Yeah.
a few weeks back.
Yeah, but again, even as we look at the intensity of the issues and that kind of stuff, and we'll be looking at the 20 units, make sure it really does work. And, you know, that'll be part of our job, so it'll be good. Are there any other issues that we have? Do you want to just quickly run through the memo, the points? I mean, the first couple, I mean, we've done this so many times that it's,
Agree that your memo, why don't we just do it? And then we
Okay.
can stop, skip over 4, let's do everything but 4 and then come back to 4.
Okay, so the first one, and basically at your last meeting,
Yep.
we went through each of these items and, for example, number 1.
yeah,
You know, you all agreed you were okay with it, so this language, it kind of goes through what the petition says, you've all seen this language before in my memorandum. And it talks about, you know, why the change is needed, and then it said you have no objection. Or the planning board has discussed and supports this item of the petition, has no objection to the proposed amendment. And this was with respect to paragraph 25, which talks about the BRO 20 lot and bulk regulations. And making the change, bulk and dimensional regulations in the BRO 20 district shall not apply to properties on which an existing building is adaptively reused for residential use.
That's the cupola building, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
that is for the cupola building. So this is verbatim language you've seen before, you said you had no objection. Item 2, with respect to section or paragraph 26 of the petition, the amendments to the boundary of the Office Park Retail Overlay District. This is about amendments to that boundary to align the parking layout. You have seen a new boundary plan. At your last meeting, you said you were fine with this, so the language at the end of item 2 is the planning board has discussed and supports this item of the petition. With item 3, this is in regards to the Office Park Retail Overlay District floor areas, paragraph 27 of the petition, where the regulations regarding floor areas, which discuss the floor area limitations. As it is written, the AFFH units in the cupola building are still being counted. So the amendment to this, which is halfway through paragraph, or item 3, the paragraph in item 3, the maximum aggregate floor area in an Office Park Retail Overlay District shall not exceed 120,000 square feet, and the maximum occupied aggregate floor area in the non-overlay portion of the Office Park District for all uses other than AFFH model ordinance units shall not exceed 500,000 square feet. Then again, this is related to the floor area within the Office Park Retail Overlay District. the request relates to a 2015 addition of the 28 units of affordable housing in the Cupola building.
Right.
This is to correct an existing situation that is on site today. And you had all discussed this language previously, and it told us that you had no objection. So that's what paragraph 3 says. Did you want me to do paragraph 4 first?
Have we done everything else, 5 and 6?
We can do number 5.
5 and 6.
With respect to paragraph 29 of the petition, the amendments of the BRO 20 and the MFP district regarding the additional number of bedrooms. The applicant is requesting changes to the number of bedrooms as allowed within the MFPD and the BRO 20 zoning district. When we added the let's talk about the Cupola building first, the BRO 20 district. When we added the AFFH units, we removed those AFFH units, the bedrooms, from the MFPD, and we put them in the Cupola building. When the town board approved the workforce and the market rate units in the Cupola building, we did not adjust the bedroom count for those units. So this 20 unit adjustment is primarily for the BRO 20 district because there are I wanna say 100 and something bedrooms. This is not in here. 103, yeah. Bedrooms in the Cupola building today, and that's all AFFH, that is workforce and market rate. Okay, that's what's there today. Given the discussions that have occurred before you in regards to the MFPD, the discussion of the basements, the larger units, the grading of the site, everything we've discussed, this applicant is now looking for an additional 9 bedrooms within the MFPD. So the 9 plus the 11 additional that are needed in the Cupola building is a total of 20 bedrooms that need to be added to the number that was originally approved as part of the, I wanna say it was 2015, maybe even going back to 2014 bedroom limitation that was established with the approvals of Chapel Crossing in the resolutions. The you guys discussed this at your previous meetings, and the total number of bedrooms on the site, as I said, is 103. The applicant is requesting a total of 316 bedrooms to the limit of 294. It's a difference of 22 bedrooms. You said you did not have a problem with this, particularly given the discussion that the town board had with the superintendent of the Joplin School District. Paragraph 6, or item 6, with respect to paragraph 30 of the petition. This is regarding the auditorium to remain within the MFPD. The applicant has provided language to be added to the zoning conformance table with the code, within the code, that identifies this as a permitted principal use, specifically as a publicly owned community facility. You discussed this previously, and it says that you support this item of the petition.
So I guess the question is, any changes to those paragraphs?
No.
Not for me.
Let's focus on
Okay.
number 4. And maybe we just ought to go sentence by sentence and see if we wanna make some changes or leave it the way it is.
Okay. With respect to paragraph 28 of the petition, the amendment to the boundary of the multifamily planned development, district boundary, and the MFPD preliminary development concept plan. This issue has been discussed by the planning board, particularly in relation to the plan changes in regards to the length of driveways, alleyways, roadways, alignment of the loop.
So it should be raised alignment. Version has raised alignment.
Raised alignment?
Raised alignment of the loop road.
Yep.
Raised alignment of the loop road.
Vertical alignment, raised alignment's probably more accurate, it's more specific.
We will add raised in front of alignment.
Yeah, I'll go with that. That's just-
Modifications to the dwelling units, amount of cut and fill, etc.
Let's stop there. Do we wanna say, that's the language now, one thing we could add when we say amount of cut and fill, we could say and balance an amount of cut and fill.
Sure. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Was that balanced?
Amount and balance
Balance
of,
and balance.
Of cut and fill.
Is that in the next sentence?
that will be the word, the two words "and balance" is after the word "amount."
That's good, that's.
What's the et cetera? What is the et cetera?
In case there
There
are.
may be other issues.
Well, the
Okay.
other, the
I mean,
other.
does that leave it open?
Well, no, this is what I'm gonna tell you, the other issues are the buildings are, expanded a little bit, I think we said on average, between 100 and 200 foot per unit from the original or from the approved MFPD. And then there may be other things that are the nuances in the plans that they submitted that will evolve themselves further through your site plan that you need to,
I think we should include the increase of the building sizes because we talked about that and we're okay with it.
Yeah, I'm just saying the things we know, maybe we put them in.
Yeah.
And just so we have it listed.
Yeah.
So then I would add, in relation to the plan changes in regards to the increase in the footprint or size?
I think building footprint?
In the building
We
footprint?
put both actually, but
Yeah, you can say
doesn't
building,
hurt.
Say that again?
We put both, footprint and size.
building footprint and
Again,
overall square
we've
footage.
exhausted the looking at it, right?
Footprints and overall square footage. And we insert that before,
Et cetera.
No,
Oh, okay,
you
yeah,
were
well-
gonna put it you were gonna
I
put the
put
beginning.
that first, and then, it now reads, in relation to the plan changes in regards to the building footprint and overall square footage,
Increase of the building.
the overall,
Increase.
Increase of building footprints and overall square footage.
the increase in
Building
building
footprint.
footprints and overall square
Square footage.
footage. The length of driveways, alleyways, roadways, raised alignment of the loop road, modifications to the dwelling units, amount and balance of cut and fill, etc.
Okay.
So then let's go to the next sentence, which is,
The planning board has discussed these issues and per documentation regarding construction sequencing, phase balancing of cut and fill, and stormwater control. The planning board supports the requested changes based on the expectation that the concerns raised regarding stormwater control, construction sequence, snow removal, cut and fill, etc. will be addressed through the planning board's site plan approval.
Okay,
let's
you
stop
have a
there.
different,
Yeah, let's stop there.
yours is a little different than ours?
Well, this is what I have, see if this is what you guys have. The planning board has discussed these issues and per documentation regarding construction sequencing, phased, balancing of cut and fill and stormwater control, the planning board supports the requested changes based upon the expectation that the potential impacts raised regarding stormwater control, construction sequence, snow removal, cut and fill, etc. will be addressed through the planning board site plan approval. That's what you guys should have.
Yeah. that's what I-
Okay, so one of the things, couple of suggestions, what we could do is the planning board has discussed these issues and maybe we should say preliminary documentation.
Yeah, in some cases, sure.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm gonna need to get
Regarding
this copy.
construction sequencing, phase balancing of cut and fill, stormwater control, the planning board supports the requested changes subject to the potential impacts raised regarding stormwater control, construction sequence, snow removal, cut and fill, etc., being addressed through the planning board site plan approval to the boards and the town engineer's approval.
I would, the only other item I would insert was, again, this phasing of the landscape plan. I think Dennis
You
spoke
wanna
to this
see that
last
too
time
as
around,
well, right?
exactly, yeah. So it's not just the construction sequence, but and the cut and fill, but also the landscape.
Yeah, and there's gonna be interim.
Construction sequence.
Yes, that's my
We're
point.
gonna interim and then final.
Right, and I think Dennis raised that last time when we had our meeting.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So any other, is that suggestion plus Bob is acceptable for that amendment to that sentence?
That's right.
It's for me?
The final sentence is the planning board notes the reservations of some of its members regarding the proposed length of driveways as not being suitable for traditional driveway function. I'll leave that for your discussion.
I think that's, clearly the case. The only question I would have, does this one sentence help the town board in making a decision about this? Because it's not, what we disagree on isn't spelled out here. And so if what some of us agree on is in the plans and what some of us disagree on is not in the plans, I don't know how the town board would know what are the items or the specifics of the disagreement. So they
Well,
could make a
one-
choice about, whether the disagreement is valid and ought to be addressed.
One of the things that was in the finding statement was they did actually talk about the alternative that we did look at, that the applicant provided to us in terms of what happens with one alternative anyway, if we, use the same plan, but we basically go to more traditional driveway lengths. And I think the majority of the board, maybe not all of us, but the majority of the board felt that those impacts would be too great. Now, the town board, I guess, has considered that as well. My sense is the town board has listened to us and heard us, but they're gonna make the decision at this point, and we went through this verbally last time at the joint meeting. So,
So there's no
I think I'm on the losing side of this, but I think that, we've talked about it enough, and I think they're just gonna make the decision.
So, fair enough. So there's no reason to at least reference an earlier discussion? We don't have necessarily spell out what the disagreements are, the specifics of that, but it makes sense to reference a meeting or
Do you wanna say
some
as
meeting
discussed with the town board?
At our
as
work
discussed
session?
at,
Discussed
Joint
with a joint
meetings.
meeting with the
Joint
town board,
meetings.
comma, the planning board.
which is in the records of our
Sure,
discussion,
do that.
something like that.
You can
so
reference
that-
the dates, 'cause
So
I
they
think there
can
are at least
look
one,
at
maybe
two
two.
this document
Yeah,
to
two
remind
times, yeah.
themselves of
You
what
had
it
one
was.
before the petition was submitted and you had one after the petition was submitted.
I think the more recent one would maybe be more cogent
I think so,
because-
the one, the joint, the
Like
joint meeting
2-3
held,
weeks ago.
yeah,
Yeah, if you,
Joint meeting on, what was the date then?
yeah.
December, was it December 2?
Hold on.
December 3, I think,
Whatever that day
Let me
was.
see if I can find it for you.
I think it was December
Whatever
3.
that Tuesday is.
It's a Tuesday, December 3rd.
It was, yeah,
December 3.
12/3. Is that it?
12/3,
or,
yeah.
yeah, 12/3.
This is a public hearing, can the public speak?
No, this is not.
This is
supposed
not
to
a
be,
public hearing.
No discussion, no. Sorry.
so that would be helpful so that they could go back and remind themselves what the discussion was all about. Okay.
So with those amendments, any further changes? Good, I think
Do you
we're-
guys wanna
And-
resolve to,
As amended?
as amended?
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, sure.
I have your.
I'll have to go over with
You mentioned that certain things would be addressed in the site plan approval. Will some of the things we just discussed also be eligible to be discussed?
Yes, I think, yeah.
Okay.
I think that's why we earmarked those things,
Yeah.
and some of them,
So, given
some are
that-
really set, but I think the important ones we'll be looking at in site plan approval.
Good.
Alright, so is there a motion to adopt the referral memo as amended?
Motion?
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Someone running over there?
So,
I am.
to close
Alright, so
the,
you're-
just to close the discussion on this,
Yes.
just to tell the board and public, the applicant, what's gonna happen. The town board will be considering a variety of measures. One will be an amendment to the finding statement to comply with the State Environmental Quality Review Act. They will be considering amendments to the zoning law, amendments to the district boundaries, and other revisions so that at the end of the day, the applicant, if all those are approved, with the amended PDCP for the residential, will be in a position to come back to the board, pursue a master subdivision of the entire site, and also a re-subdivision, once the master is approved, of a re-subdivision of the East Village lot, and then pursue final site plan approval, planning board. Those would be the process
Right, okay.
for the future.
And right now, I think the town board's in public hearing on this,
town
right?
board,
So this
yes.
is still open for public comment.
I think, I
Town
assume
board.
it is, yes. Okay, I'm gonna coordinate with Sabrina now, so that
You're gonna go with Felicia.
Thank you.
She's gonna,
Thanks, Les.
Yeah,
Thanks for this shit.
yeah, thank you, Les.
Good idea, Les. Good at thinking.
we had it all planned out, don't worry, Bob. Okay. Moving, cooking with
Okay,
gas.
we move now to our next item. This is a referral from the zoning board for the Mount Kisco Country Club, Realty Corp. This is an amendment to the special use permit application, a variance for building height and a development coverage variance for existing conditions for the installation of a seasonal temporary tennis court dome to cover 2 existing tennis courts, 10 Taylor Lane. And as soon as I find all my papers.
Okay. Can't type, I could type pretty fast.
Very fast.
I don't know if I can type faster than Felicia.
Oh, really?
I don't know, I don't know, she's good.
You type pretty damn fast.
Have you noticed your minutes have been coming rather quickly?
Yes.
Because she's very good at typing. That was one of the interview questions, was your
How
words per
many,
minute.
was per minute?
Yeah.
That reminds me that,
Here we go.
I'm just gonna not speak about these.
Oh, I love you.
Careful.
I have the greatest regard.
The feeling that this
So if we approve this, we
planning
get a
board is
pecan
that
pie
there
from these folks too, also at Thanksgiving Day.
feeling of this planning board is that there were no interview questions. That's a tragedy. And we'll make that mistake again.
And it ain't typing. Okay.
Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. I'm Victor Solaric, VKS Architects, representing the Monkeys Kill Country Club. The proposal is to put a temporary inflatable dome over 2 existing tennis courts. The tennis courts are on the property of the Monkeys Kill Country Club. It's a central 27-acre property off of Taylor Road, and it's basically surrounded by Annandale Road around 3 sides. You can kind of see the whole site plan where I'm gonna borrow this device. It's a 27-acre property. This is Bedford Road coming from Chappaqua up to Mount Kisco. This is Taylor Road and Annandale Road wraps around. I'm sure you're familiar with it. The clubhouse is on the east side of the property, and the 2 existing tennis courts that are proposed to be covered are basically right in the middle of the plan. We are here referred from the Zoning Board of Appeals. We have met several times with the planning board. We have prepared a comprehensive study of view sheds from around different areas and residential neighborhood, and I have also met with the Architecture Review Board to get their input and comments to the zoning board that happened on December 4th of this year. So we are here tonight to hear your comments about the proposed project. It's a temporary dome that will go up on around October 15th every year, and would have to come down within 120 days, which would be about April 15 the following year. The proposed material is a solid fabric, and I have a small sample if you.
Is it translucent?
It's not translucent, it's a solid material. There's a translucent panel that's proposed to be at the top of the dome. You can sort of see how much light comes through. It's very little. It doesn't emanate any light. The lighting interior would be down towards the court, so there's no light coming up. So we have 3 different colors of the exterior material that's solid. The Architecture Review Board felt that the green color was most promising and would create least impact.
At nighttime, if you're all lit up, no light escapes out through that
No
opening
light
on the
escapes,
top?
no.
So it kind of will maintain this dark color?
The dome is proposed to be 39 foot high, and if you look at the
Which requires the 4-foot
which
variance.
requires it's correct, and then the light strip is at the very top, about 30 foot high, 30 foot length across the top apex of the half round profile. So nothing comes out of the side, and then the strip is about 6 feet wide and goes straight up, but there's really no lighting going up. because all the interior lighting shines down.
So just out of curiosity,
Yes.
then, just make sure I understand.
Yes.
Usually when you see a tennis bubble, it's a glowing white mammoth on the horizon. But are you saying that this green retains all the light within the bubble and that you don't have, you will not have that glow?
Some domes have translucent material. Some are solid. There are domes that you drive by, you see them because they're white predominantly, but they don't glow. There are some that are made of translucent material, and obviously then the lighting comes out. This is 100% solid material. So even if you pick the light color, the white color, the light would not be coming through.
And
But
the base
So if I
where,
take my phone and turn on my flashlight,
sure, go right ahead.
the light won't come through? Well,
and at the base where it's fastened down, there's no like
What a good
leakage
idea. Would you
underneath
like
the
me to-
base
Yeah,
coming
sure.
up.
No, the base is anchored into a concrete beam all the way around,
Continuously?
bolted.
I think that's a translucent one.
The reason being is that you wanna minimize the
you see
air
it?
escaping out of the
Turn it
tunnel.
off.
We could try
Anything,
one of
anything
our
that
layers.
work?
They work well.
Look,
You can't see
I can't
through
see
it.
nothing.
we'll put that in the minutes, tested translucency with phone.
Actual empirical testing at the planning board
Yes,
meeting.
yes.
That's right,
Hey, we
scientifically.
do it all here.
It's like Consumer Reports
That's right.
in our labs.
Try this one, Sabrina. This is the translucent.
Is that the truth?
I was
They found
confused
a little girl.
at one
Yes,
point.
Wondering
Look
how
at
they
that.
found her.
so
Wow.
that's the strip at the top of
Yes.
the bubble?
Right,
It acts as
right.
like a skylight for the.
Yes, yeah, it really lets light in during daylight, so you have some natural light.
In one of these responses, I see that it actually says in the summer months, the dome will be open from 6 AM to 10 PM. Is that
No,
correct?
no, you know, the club is open from 6 to 10,
Right,
but
but it says the dome will be open to members from 6 AM to 9 PM. It might be just an error then?
No,
Where it
that's
was-
not
what
summer
they-
months, it's in
No,
the
the
Summer
dome
months,
comes
the dome will be
down
open to
in the
members from
spring.
6 AM to 10
Does
PM.
it?
It's in,
It says it.
It must be a typo because in summer months the dome will be down.
Right, I thought the whole thing was just temporary, so.
Exactly.
And then how is this construction? What supports it? Is it done by air pressure or is it
It's a
steel
concrete
beams?
beam that goes around the perimeter, basically 118 by 118 square. It's a 4-foot deep beam. The fabric is anchored with the 2x4s laid across and bolted down all the way around the perimeter. And in 6 months it has to come down.
But is it supported by air pressure?
By air pressure, yes, yes.
So what we really need to hear is what are you doing with the mechanicals and what kind of noise is
Correct.
being emanated?
So
from
there
this?
there is basically an air HVAC unit
Right.
that's proposed to be located on the west side of the and I will actually show you, there's another plan.
Because you have air pumps, heater, generator, and other equipment, I think, you're basing on that one side, the west side of the dome,
The west side is the inside.
toward the golf course, right? Toward Kittle House, on the side of the hill, toward your house.
No, mine's a little bit off to the side, thank you.
What's a lot of equipment? Is this yours? Are those pumps making noise?
They can. Unless they're bathroom.
I mean, it is interior to their whole site, so that helps.
What's that?
You know, this is
Oh,
right
yeah,
in the middle
yes,
of
it's
their whole
internalized.
site.
Yeah.
So that helps a lot.
And the noise stuff will be facing the clubhouse and everything else, so they can enjoy it during dinner.
Which is fine. They're members.
Yep.
Have a good holiday, everybody.
Thank you for stopping by, do the same.
Okay, so on plan S3,
That's three.
there's
Good
a
idea.
detailed
Drive safe.
plan, which shows, it's on the right-hand side of the screen, which shows on the upper side of the plan, you'll see 3 rectangles. In the middle, it's a pad that is just for storing of the tent in the summer. So the tent gets folded down and it gets stored on the pad.
I thought somewhere in here we read something that was stored off-site after the off-season.
No, it's gonna go on that pad.
Okay.
On
That's
the,
where it said-
on the left and right of on the top of the plan, are 2 concrete pads that will have the, air handling unit, that's the fan essentially.
Can you point those out on the plan?
Yes. So this would be one of the pads that has the air handler on it, and then the other one is a backup generator, which basically acts, keeps the structure inflated in case there's a power outage and et cetera.
And where's the fabric, the dome stored?
It's right in the middle.
There. And could you show us on the inset, if that's what it, I'm sorry, the,
Yeah.
yeah, where is the equipment?
Right there, this is the pad, this is the one of the equipment pad, and this is the other one. So it's just slightly rotated. This is the site plan, the site plan, this is the photo.
We have fan tent back in it.
My blood pressure just, 24.
Well, this blows up quite a bit, but I think the
Yeah,
first
that's
tee
what it is.
box is over here.
Yeah.
And you're hitting down that way.
Okay.
If you look at the first page, it will show you the whole site plan.
Right, so what will you be building around the equipment for sound barrier?
There's a chain link fence, and we proposed a soundproofing blankets that will be installed on the inside of the fence. There are 2-inch thick baffles that are basically, they're exterior grade pads that muffle the noise. We also did a calculation for the noise travel to make sure that it meets the zoning ordinance for sound at 50 decibel at the property line. We have, at the closest property line, we'll be at about 38 decibel level without the blankets. So there was a study that used the noise of the machine without any attenuation at about 370 feet, which was the closest property line. The level of noise was
Have that, a file,
38.
like, in the ZBA file.
How much will it be with the baffles? Cause I know what the code says, and you've said it properly, but
So
to have
So-
these fans on and everything for, with the leaves off the trees,
Yes.
which takes away buffering, to have them on for 10, 12 hours a day, it's gonna be a lot of noise. It's different than just mowing the lawn for somebody for an hour.
Well, you need to have it on 24/7, want you to keep the
It's
fan.
on
pumped up.
24/7 because it's
Yeah.
a fan that has
Okay,
to keep
worse
the
then.
tent up. So 38 decibel is a noise level of quiet room. It's referred to as a library kind of noise.
It is the winter months too.
At 38 decibel, that's not taking into account the blankets. The blankets are, according to the specification, cutting down the noise by 75%. The noise calculation is not a linear calculation, so it's different frequencies travel at different distances. It's very complex to recalculate how the sound would reverberate, because sound travels similar to light at a straight line until it bounces back to hit off of something. So if you have a blanket on all sides, basically reducing or limiting the noise from traveling, the only way it can go up is up, and then until it finds a barrier or something but to bounce off of, that'll refract and then come down to the ground.
What about the sound of, believe it or not, the tennis balls and the players inside and how that reverberates inside a bubble? Because usually you can hear that quite loudly outside of these bubbles. We actually had an application on that and it failed because the tennis balls made too much noise.
Okay.
Remember?
I couldn't tell you at this point how much noise travels from inside the dome.
Well, I think there's a factor, and I have no idea what it is,
Right.
but there's a factor that this noise actually internalized, actually increases because of the echo nature of these bubbles. I don't know if that's been factored, but again, most of it's on the other side, so it may not be a factor, but that's something that should at least be documented to understand what that noise level might be. Because you can hear pretty loudly outside of these bubbles, these sports bubbles.
Right. Well,
Translucent material or this heavy?
I have no idea.
it's
Good
it's
point.
very
I don't
likely
know.
that
This
you
could be
will
heavier
hear it
like the-
outside the bubble, but everywhere around these bubbles, you have minimum 370 feet
Right.
to the nearest neighbor or property or road. And at that distance, you will not hear anything.
We need to know what the noise is so we can ascertain whether your statement is true or not.
Well, that's something that I think we could refer to the ZBA and make sure that
Yeah.
they check.
Yeah, in your referral memo, you can say, you know, we can summarize your concern about the noise, and request that they further investigate during winter months the impact of the retention devices and further.
And I like the green color, the only other color I would consider is camouflage. You know,
I asked about it.
And they like green better?
Well, I asked the manufacturer,
Yeah.
and hasn't been requested and hasn't been available so far. So I thought it would be a good idea to do that, but so far they offer the green.
Forest green, yeah.
I have a question about one of the renderings on A8 of the photo simulations. So U42 is from the Kittle House. But when you sit, and it's it looks like it's angled so that there's a copse of trees that provide some screening. But if I recall correctly from the last time that I was at the Kittle House, you can sit in the dining room and look through that open alleyway of trees towards the Mount Kisco Country Club.
Yes.
And I'm wondering what kind of view, if any, one has of the bubble from that perspective.
You would actually see the bubble
You would
from the dining room.
From the dining room.
And it's basically in the middle of the plan. This is the photo that you're referring to, right? And so the bubble would be, you'll be actually see through these trees. The dark greenery is where the bubble would be.
Behind that.
Yeah.
It's, yes.
If you're over to where the furniture is, you would see through the hand to the
Yeah.
golf course.
So I
I know,
wonder
I'm married.
if I wonder if the people at the Kittle House are aware of that.
We have had some comments from the public. There was one neighbor that came to the zoning board meetings, I think 2 or 3 times. Who, he is located on the corner of Bedford Road and the, I think it's 47 Bedford Road. Right in the corner of the country club property. And he was concerned about his views, and we have studied that angle quite a bit. There's another neighbor on Annandale that sent a letter of support for the application. And Kittle House was notified as part of the notification process, and we haven't received any.
So let me ask you about that notification, were there, unless I'm misunderstand, this is part of a standard procedure where a notice goes
That's
out
correct.
that there is a project in the neighborhood and it's your.
It's a requirement of the zoning board,
Right. And so it's a piece of paper that says that this project is being considered by the zoning board. But there were no drawings or images that they were sent in order to explain to them what the improvements were going to be.
I think the notice states that they are publicly available.
No, I understand all that, I just,
Right, the
question I had,
notice
have they
went
seen,
out.
have they seen the materials, do you know? Whether they have?
I can tell you that the neighbors who were most interested have been before the zoning board of appeals. They came to the first meeting, the applicant did additional, photographic analysis for specific neighbors. So they've seen the materials. The notice that was sent to everybody talked about what the project was, and it gave a link to go see the application.
Okay. So we're assuming that the Kittle House did the link and looked at the materials. We aren't responsible for them doing it or not doing it, they've been notified, I understand that.
Yes.
But I believe that this will impact the quality of the experience at the Kittle House. That backyard, the terrace, I mean, that's just a special experience in town. And there's something which is really special, which is actually a common feature of really, really good landscape design, which is the distant view. There's a near view, and then there are landscape materials which are in the foreground for a distant view. And it's a distant view which really gives a sense of space and a sense of really being part of nature. And historically, that, at the end of the distant view, that's where you might put a folly, right? Like you might put a little pavilion of some kind, would be painted white. in order to draw your eye to that point and to sort of in your mind put yourself out there. To look at this view here, I think that this is really one of the special features of being out there. It sounds like it's kind of subtle and nuanced, but it really, really is a powerful thing, and it's something that's used all the time historically in landscape design. So when Kittle House looks at the materials, if they have, I'm not certain that they're aware of how special that view actually is to the experience of being there. I don't know whether it's within our purview to alert them to this, or to refer such concerns to the zoning board and let them take it from here. But I think it's a big thing. It's a big thing not only for the Kittle House, but for all the people in town who go there and sit there. They're gonna go there and sit there and say, what the heck is that and what happened here?
Is it unanimous feeling for the board? Because in my opinion, and Jen, you would tell them otherwise, I believe you should emphasize the importance of this aspect in your referral memo to the ZBA and explain to them how important you think the view is and how the materials it would disrupt, so on and so forth, everything you've just said, and urge the either ZBA or ZBA to direct staff to specifically ensure that the Kittle House has plans and purview and is aware of when this is on their agenda next.
I think-
I agree, I agree with your comments. I don't think it would be appropriate for this board or any other board of the town to specifically alert specific property owners about an application.
Sure.
It's a uniform notice that goes out,
Okay.
and the obligation is on the property owner to investigate further.
And
one of the
But I
questions-
do agree with the comments going into the referral memo.
Sorry, one of the questions I would ask is, what does it look like with leaves off? What we have here are leaves on, which change what you see and don't see. And, people go there and look out and look at the snow that's, on the golf course and everything. So it's a year-round visibility question, so.
And it's mainly a leaf off visibility question because it's October to April.
Right now,
So
it's
it's
easy,
so
yeah.
it's a leaf, having a leaf on view doesn't even give you an approximation of what the
Yeah, it kinda
October
goes both
to
ways.
April
In the
view
summertime,
would
when
be.
people are in the backyard using the space, the bubble will be gone. But in
Right.
wintertime, when they're inside viewing out at the space, the bubble will be
Yeah.
there.
Yes.
And you'll see the bubble because the leaves will be down
Yep.
obstructing your.
Well put.
Well, it's not entirely certain if these events are going to necessarily coincide, that the people are gonna be moving outside onto the terrace the day that the bubble goes down.
No, I'm not saying that
Right.
specific day,
No, I
I'm saying
understand
the
that.
summertime
No,
when it's
I
warmer.
understand generally what you're saying, I don't disagree with it. The other thing, just because the leaves are off, doesn't mean that there isn't tree mass, because there's significant tree mass here. There isn't tree mass which still frames that view, it's just leafless tree mass.
We just don't have a good representation of it.
And so this also might speak to the question of,
Victor, don't you?
Yes,
Did leave.
that's what I did.
so this also might speak to the question of the color.
Right.
There's just something that, if you spent any time on military bases, and I'm a Navy brat, you were in the Army, right? The structure itself it's not necessarily uniformly a kind of a structure and a kind of a shape which speaks to a park-like country club experience, right? Because it has many other uses, industrial uses, salt domes, right? On army bases and navy bases for equipment storage. And so there's a connotation of this kind of a structure, which is, if you're looking at it, especially, or in one case from the Kittle House, you look out there and say, who put that thing out there, what's it for? Because it feels like it's an industrial thing. Now, the color part, the green it would very well, in whatever location it was, would be, I think, would help blend it in. Green to me, however, speaks of a military, it's the army, what's the army doing out here?
Quonset huts were always
always
green,
green.
Good question. Okay, so maybe what you do is have to think it through and a little bit differently. We're gonna try and go around it. I mean, it's one thing that you say, well, gee, it's 120 days when it'll be up.
180.
180, so it's up half a year. So it's gonna be up when the leaves fall to a certain extent if they fall early, and, you know,
Well, it's interesting, in preparing this application and working through the presentation, we have actually started last year about this time when I took first pictures, when the leaves were off. It was very early on and I did not have actually enough pictures to demonstrate all the angles from let's say November and December. When we developed these pictures, they were later on in the season in May and June and July, when the leaves were lush and you know, very much in full force. Subsequently, when we went to the last zoning board, we submitted pictures of leaf off conditions, and they were early November. And there were still some leaves on, there was not like 100% bare. Even today, actually, you have still some leaves on. So yes, there is, it's not strictly on and off, there's in between seasons and the situation changes throughout
now,
the year.
where are the 20-foot tall trees gonna go? Are they gonna go on the west side of this?
We're gonna go on the west side where the most exposure is to the, even though it's over the fairways, that will provide most screening. From the south side, you never see the bubble from anywhere because there's the clubhouse and there's a knoll that goes down onto the Annandale Road. Likewise, from Bedford Road and from the north side, you have buildings, you have evergreens, you have a long distance and buffers of evergreens covering from anywhere on Taylor Road and Bedford Road the view of the bubble. And from Taylor Road, looking from the east, you cannot see anything because you're looking over the clubhouse. And then you're down a little bit, so you're looking up over the clubhouse.
You have another set of, another pair of tennis courts. Is there a difference in elevation with those tennis courts, and would the use of those tennis courts in some way mitigate that view from the Kittle House, for example, across the area? Or are they at the same exact level?
They're about 2 feet apart, there's a slight step down to the next to the next set.
So the ones to the west, are they lower?
To the north.
What do you look at,
To the right? I just wondering if you looked at those angles, to see if that might be different.
Yeah, so on the S3, there's 2 tennis courts shown to the right.
Which is north.
Which is north, and those are about 2 foot lower. There's a slight step down, but there's also difficulty of the site. There's a large rock outcropping on the back side. There's the housing building to the right of the 2 courts. And so when the decision was made to pick 2 courts, this was clearly the better suited
Well, it's
location.
easier to construct, but it may be, well, my point is it might stick up a little bit higher.
I understand,
And maybe there might be a way to further mitigate that view. I mean, you know, based on the concerns you're hearing here.
Right.
Well, it still would be 39 feet tall. If it's in a hole by 2 feet, then it's only 37 feet compared to where it could have been. But it's the trees are important. Dennis, these are tall trees. They're gonna have some difficulty growing, I would suspect. They're that big?
I saw that they were planting evergreens that were larger size than you would typically
Yeah.
put on a landscape plan, so they're trying to start out
Big.
as robust as possible, right, so.
And I think that's commendable, but we have to have something or make a recommendation that there definitely, these trees will be maintained in case, you know, they don't get enough water in the fall or whatever the issue is.
Yeah, no, the water, if they're evergreens, the water, you gotta have water source, you gotta look at it a little differently,
And
yeah.
that they will be replaced right away if
Right.
for some reason they fail.
The reason we added the evergreens was that there are pockets between the existing vegetation on the west side that leave the dome more visible from across the valley, from Kittle House and from the others. So this was an attempt to supplement what is there. It's a mixed bag of deciduous and evergreen trees. Those actually probably work best together to provide overall blanket and you know, rather than just creating a green wall that is maybe harder to maintain and last longer time, so that was the
I think this is a critical point, because I'm looking at this, this exhibit, which shows the tree masses and the views from which the points from which the photographs were taken. Could you get this exhibit up, if you could find that?
Sure.
And it does show that the bubble will go behind, as Dick, you just said, behind the existing tree mass. But that's essentially a deciduous one, and so the intent would be to create an evergreen tree grouping to essentially mask the building at the end of that view. And if that could be done in a naturalized way, instead of a line of trees, the way it's often done.
Yeah, something that's
staggered.
There you go. You know, make it as I'm talking about, right in here, is this the spot, Dick, that you were talking about?
Correct.
Right. And this is a Kittle House view here. If there's a way to supplement this with a natural grouping of white pines and, you know, Norway spruce, or, you know, whatever it is that would be natural to this environment, in a way that you have a landscape architect do it as though they naturally grew there, and put a lot in there.
Right, so
I think that would go a long way to alleviate my concerns anyway.
Yeah, mine
And
also.
exactly in that same line of thinking,
Have to
we
be enough mature enough.
we have worked with the landscape architect to prepare this mitigation plan. And she suggested the plan that would be best suited for the location, for the exposure, and if possible, fast growing, so that even though these trees are planted at a larger size than you would typically see, we achieve a good screening as soon as possible.
Okay.
The slight challenge is that the area that is west of the site is sloping down towards the stream. So actually you're kind of fighting the grade. If the further away you go from the dome, the lower you are. So you would have to have 60-foot trees to achieve any kind of coverage. That's why it's closer to the dome, and it kind of works in concert with the existing landscaping and with the grade to really achieve a nice screening.
Look forward to seeing the landscape plan. Are we gonna see that?
It
Does
has
this
been
eventually come
submitted,
to us
the
for
mitigation
a
plan.
site plan approval or not?
No.
Okay. Well, we might make a
Well, you,
recommendation to the
what
zoning board.
what did I say, when it,
It's January, at the end of January is before the
Right.
ZBA again.
well, but you have a certain amount of time, hang on a minute.
January 9th.
Can we
January
review
9th,
supplemental
when's your
materials?
first meeting?
7th.
7th. You could you submit to this board for their January 7th meeting, the landscape plan?
I believe it's part of the package.
Already?
Is it here? Yeah, I think Dennis commented on some of the issues.
Oh, here it is.
Or maybe it's not a plan.
I
And this is
commented on the
insufficient.
care of the evergreens that they were going to
If it's
plant,
S4?
especially water and
Yes.
staking.
I don't think that's gonna do it. That's not gonna do it.
So these are pretty
Some arborvitae, that's not-
large trees.
Yeah, but these are deciduous, aren't
Correct.
they? Yeah, so they're not gonna screen it in the wintertime. In the wintertime's the problem, because that's when this, building's gonna go up. This, and these are arborvitae, they don't get to be big enough, do they?
Not really.
About 60 feet.
No, 15,
Right.
20, right, maybe?
Oriental spruce, I don't know how big that is, but there are only a couple tall trees that are proposed, evergreens that are proposed here. I think this should be looked at again, and if there's an opportunity for us to look at a revision, I think that would
Be helpful.
be helpful.
Well, the question would be, if you want the applicant to revise the landscape plan to include more evergreen species, you can ask them to revise and resubmit for your January 7th meeting. You can hold your referral memo, I mean, we can produce a draft memo for you to the ZBA, which you can review at your January 7th meeting.
Oh, very good, sir.
So we can kind of do two things, you can ask the applicant for more information or give Dennis an opportunity to review the typology of the plants and their location. Based on your comments tonight, he can give more feedback for January 7th. We can incorporate additional comments into a draft memo that Felicia and I prepare for you.
Yeah, based on our comments here.
Based on this, yeah, exactly, and then you can continue this discussion to the seventh. And then you would still be within your timeframes by the 9th to get a response memo back to the ZBA.
Is looking at the bubble shifting to the other two courts still on the table for us, or is that a non-starter?
The zoning board has not looked at that, if you wish the zoning board to look at that,
Like
you
one of our
can-
points.
Is that what, okay.
Yeah, again, this is a referral memo, the zoning board is doing the review, you can guide them, and they can choose to endorse your comments or not.
Let's give it a look,
Consider it.
hard
Yeah,
look.
make it a-
Yeah.
May I ask, what's the elevation difference between here and here? Which is this higher, or are they equal, or what?
It's about the same level, the stream is down low by
Yeah.
about 30 feet. I
Okay,
believe.
somewhere in there.
Right, but it goes back up towards the Kittle House, so I think Kittle House goes almost straight down, straight, or maybe slightly down.
Do you know the horizontal distance from the Kill House to the bubble?
Yes, I believe I do.
I mean, if those tennis courts are 120 in length, right? It looks like you
I
have
know that
about
to the
6 of them.
I know that to the property line, we have about 700 feet.
Makes sense.
700 feet.
So
No, it's a vista. There's
Here-
a vista that's
and you view it
created
over
over the
the-
fairway.
over the
yeah.
here you have
I've lost many balls on that hole cut around that.
on the S2,
You won't see it from the dining room of the Kittle House.
on the S2, if you're looking at the site plan, looking straight up is the property line, and then to the right, to Bedford Road is 650 feet. So that's about the same distance to the western property line. And let's say the Kittle House is another 100 some odd feet from the property line, you're looking about 750 feet.
Maybe 150 feet.
So I think it would also be helpful in the view from the Kittle House. And the photographs are always tough because they don't really accurately,
The depth perception.
Right. It's either farther away or closer than it looks in the photograph. I think usually it's farther away than it looks. It's closer than it looks in the photograph, but nonetheless, if you could, in these views, find some way to indicate where it would be in the first location, the proposed location, and then the other location in this photograph.
Okay.
So that we could sort of read it, because it's hard to know in this particular.
Where you're looking, right.
Um,
We have rendered in the dome in the other views that we studied in detail. And some of the other
Yes, I did see that,
renderings,
because that
you'll
was
see
very
a red line, the bubble kind of, even though you have a greenery there, the dome is shown there. Yep.
Right.
So we can similarly do
That
that
would be excellent.
from the Kittle House.
And so the other observation, getting back to the color, as much as I think that Army green might be unfortunate with respect to the long view from the Kittle House, I think it probably would be the right thing to do.
I would respectfully call it forest green.
Forest green?
Nothing against the army, but it's not an
Yeah.
army green.
Try joining the army and call something forest green. You'll be in real trouble. But the other observation, and it's useful to see, for instance, on sheet A3 with the photographs, view number 5, to see the outline of the bubble and that adjacent building.
Right.
This is really going to be on site in the vicinity of these buildings. This is really going to be a big building. It looks as though the 39 feet, if that's 4 feet above the height limit, I'm guessing this building's going to be about the same height as the clubhouse and the other buildings that are there. Is that right, Sabrina?
Yes.
Thank you. So, that's really sort of up to them. It's, you know, it's their playground, and if that's what they like, I think that's fine. It is a little bit unfortunate for anybody else's view into the property, seeing this big green thing, really being one of the dominant features of the building composition. And I would have not gone through all of the views here to see in what locations that is true. But if there's some good locations where that's particularly sensitive, we might suggest some screening from the road or from adjacent property.
Like I said, the views from the Taylor Road, from Bedford Road, basically from the north and east and southeast side, there's really no point anywhere along the road that you can look into the property and see the dome. And it's partially because of the topography and partially because of the existing buildings that are there.
I see that.
When you get down to the pool house at the bottom of Annandale, and you turn around and you look back up the hill at the top of the knoll past the pro shop. So if you're standing down here, where you're actually crossing the stream, and you look back up right where the dimension line is,
Right.
you would see this corner, and that view is actually included in both Leaf Off and Hoop On. And I believe it's this one right there. So this, actually, we
Oh, I
kept
see. You
we
did
kept
it
the
white.
dome
You did it
white
white,
because otherwise you would never see
Yeah,
anything.
okay. I
But
think-
on what is it,
Yeah, I think that's not a problem.
so that view is there, and that was certainly something that we were concerned with.
Does the manufacturer offer two-tone? And when I say that, at a certain level, you can have green, and at the top, more of this misty gray, so it blends in with the sky? I don't know, you guys, you're design guys, does that make any sense at all when you're looking up and seeing perhaps it would mitigate a little bit? That it blends in, I don't know if the manufacturer that way. I don't know if it makes any sense, but this effect.
I hear you.
If it gradated, it would. Yeah. If it didn't just go green to gray,
Yeah,
if it went.
yeah,
Like
so
a
you have
water,
the green
like a
for,
water tank is the color.
I think it would be a stark color, a stark difference. I don't know if you or it has to be just
It
one
hasn't
tone,
come
one
up,
piece.
we can certainly inquire.
That's.
It's a point in your memo.
I mean, it's sewed together,
Yeah,
so it must be possible to use different fabrics.
Well, the only thing
well, same fabric, but different colors.
I mean, yes, different colors, sorry.
I guess that might work for people on site, right? But for the distant views, that gray would be in contrast to the trees, I think.
Or it blends in with the sky, I don't know, it's so gray around here these days, I don't know. but-
We're Seattle
It's gray everywhere.
Yeah, it is. But I don't know, you guys know that stuff better than I do,
Right.
just a thought.
That's a good thought.
Okay.
Alright, so we will, so Victor, is it possible for you to, you did not include the winter views with the dome sketched in, or did you?
They were included, I'm not sure about the Kittle House view, whether there was.
Is there a way that you can provide information on a view from the Kittle House,
From the second floor down.
from the second floor dining room of the Kittle House?
Yes,
Or and the outside patio
right,
of the Kittle
Right.
House to your site with the dome
rendered in.
rendered in. If you could submit that prior to the 17th.
What's my deadline?
Well, how long would it take you?
I'll do it this week, if the weather cooperates, so I would submit it Monday, probably not Tuesday or Wednesday, but if I can, I would shoot for Monday next week.
The 23rd?
Okay, and that's fine.
Would
And
that
if-
be okay?
Listen, and if you need more time, it's the holidays. I mean, I think the
My wife
important-
is in charge and I can't.
But I think, to be quite honest with you, if you can submit it anytime next week, I
Okay.
think that would be helpful, so we could forward it to the board.
Except Friday.
That's kind of tight.
Yeah, except, yeah.
So by next Thursday.
We're closed on, we're
That'd
closed,
be the 23rd.
it's gonna have to be the 23rd.
Although you have the whole.
You're closed 26, 27?
25, 26.
So he could get it on the 27th. That still gives
That's a Friday.
10 days.
No, they're closed the 24th, 25th.
We're closed 24, 25. That's it.
So you could do it the 26th or the 26th or 27th.
Does that include the landscape? No, the landscape plan is for the revised landscape plan. Do we get to see that also, or is that just go as a recommendation that the ZBA asked for it?
Could you do a revised landscape plan?
That's kind of out of my hands because I need to
That's a
work with the
second
landscape architect.
Fair enough.
I can't promise that.
Can you inquire about that?
Of course.
And if you can, and we can get it by the 26th or 27th with the revised rendering, that would be helpful, would further your
So
discussion.
give you more information to make
Yep.
it, to make it.
Yeah.
And Victor, the view from the Kittle House would be from the main floor dining area, not the second floor, which is apartments, not apartments, but.
No, yeah. That's where the view was taken from, by the way, the one that you have, except it's Lee Fawn.
Right.
But I was with the permission of the Kittle House.
Okay.
I'm not having lunch there.
Oh, you want
All right.
Yes.
Sure, yeah, I know. Well aware, thank you.
Thank you.
Bring your
Great.
wallet.
Appreciate it, thank you very much for your input.
Thank you.
Thank
Close-
you.
close this
Keep
out.
up the good work. You're getting there.
We're gonna miss this. Exactly. Okay, our next matter is the informal appearance before the board. Informal hearing. Not?
Good night and happy holidays.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas to you.
It's just an appearance, it's not a hearing.
Really?
You need to
What's the
set
difference?
hearing. Because this is like an informal, it's the type, it's a work session. So you need to set a public hearing if you,
Okay.
we're before, it's never been called that
I know, we're
officially.
getting very fancy.
What?
I've never been invited to an informal appearance before.
You're invited
Almost sounds like,
tonight.
a court thing.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Okay, anyway, 16 HRR LLC, Ferravecchio Lot 4, application for a site plan, stormwater pollution prevention plan, amended subdivision, steep slopes and tree removal permit approval, 16 Hollow Ridge Road. And now we know why Sheila is leaving. She can't take it anymore.
We're falling apart.
Yeah, we're all falling apart. She hasn't even left them all falling apart.
The question is, why are we staying?
Oh, I have one last, Bob, do you know whether the existing tennis courts are paved or are they clay? I forget.
Probably Hartford, aren't they?
Are they hard?
Yes.
Paved.
Paved?
I'll tell you
I
what
think
this
they're
is
hard
about.
to,
Hartford.
they're hard
But
to.
either way, it's no new impervious.
Huh?
It's no new impervious anyway.
Okay, so it's pervious right now?
Impervious.
Impervious, okay, so then that
It's no
affects,
additional impervious.
that
The only
affects
thing,
calculation.
it's a, chapter 9, chapter 10, development, and really what they have to do is treat the water quality. This is no new runoff.
How about the big grade beam that they have to install to hold the tank down?
It's gotta exceed 1,000 square feet, but they're gonna treat all the water quality coming off that, and that's gonna exceed.
And they have so much,
If you get the water quality volume over the roof, it's gonna exceed the grade beam for a storm event anyway, so they'll be fine. He said it's gonna be quite a bit of water quality volume, it's almost 3 inches they have to pick up over that.
By the way,
entire area.
this is not a temporary building.
Christine.
It's an intermittently permanent building.
you mean you don't think they could take it down April
Well,
15th?
you gotta leave the frame up, right?
Yeah, if they put it up,
New terminology, it's great.
Yeah, they'll be picking up all the water quality volume.
Yeah, they have to take it
Oh, they
down.
have to, it's a redevelopment, they have to take all the, little 1 year storm.
No,
like
but I
I
mean,
said.
come April 16th, can they decide, we wanna leave the bubble up all year?
Put it on this, that you can't.
I don't think they can.
No, the
We
state
still gotta get a
building
permit.
code has
Yeah,
a
They get some sort
jurisdiction
of
over it
violation
in
from,
terms
Tom
of the
Paul.
type of construction, if it stays up past 180 days.
It's right in the code.
So if you take it down, put it up, take it down, put it up, it's considered temporary.
Yes, but it's state building code. I had one in another community, so max is
Thank
180
you, you're the best.
days. Yeah.
Do we have to pay you for that advice?
No.
It's on us.
I guess we owe you one.
I just happen to know, I've gone through the experience, and I've gone through the whole discussion of white, gray, green, all of it too, it's interesting.
I guess you know.
Oh, it's fascinating. It's just fascinating.
Yeah, it's like, I didn't bring the right crayon.
Thank you.
Good evening, Jerry Portarella, John Tellard is here, and Michael and Steve Gaetano. So when we were last here, you asked us to put together some additional information, which we have done. I just wanna very quickly summarize what we've done, and we're happy to answer any questions. This drawing has the surrounding homes on it. This was one of the ones that you had asked us for, just so that you could see the relationship. And you'll see, this is the proposed house, these are the two houses on the common driveway, right here and right here, and then there's a house down here, and then you can see over in this location is another house, and then there's a property that's developed over here, and you see these improvements come very close to the property
Yeah,
line.
that's on North Castle, right? That's the line between the two towns?
I believe so, yes, that's the North Castle line, and there's a trail, I believe, that goes right along this common boundary here.
Is that our trail that you referred to in the memo? That's the easement for the trail, the public
That
walking
was
trail?
part of the original subdivision, I believe.
Is that on,
I believe it is.
it's in our town or is it North Castle?
I believe it's in our town.
I thought so too.
I think it goes on a line, I actually think it goes over onto both lines, the way it straddles the
I see.
common boundary line between the municipalities. It was very difficult just because for scale purposes to include the surrounding homes on all of the drawings that we have, just the way we drew it, so we included as much as we could where we could, but this is really the drawing, if you wanna see the relationship, this is really the drawing to refer to understand that. So, and I just, we really are in proportion, if not smaller than a lot of the surrounding homes, just in terms of square footage and size, but this just shows you the relationship. We, our arborist, did go out and finish looking at the trees, we've had all the trees tagged, and the condition noted, and we've updated our tree removal permit application. There was an adjustment in the number of trees that have to come down, but ultimately, at the end of the day, there are actually fewer than were approved to come down, largely because the number of trees in the expansion area, we are hoping we don't have to remove now or ever, because we are gonna go forward and seek the waiver, the fill waiver from the Westchester County Health Department. So there are about 14 trees that are in that vicinity that hopefully we will never have to remove. We looked at the, we revised the steep slopes map, and that's drawing S9. I'm just trying to pull that up here. You want to see which drawings on here? Yes. Second. So S9 is the steep slopes map, we'll pull it up in a minute. There are actually some refinements to that, and I'm happy to report that we actually have less steep slopes disturbance than we thought we did, that we reported last time around. We have a little bit more than was originally approved, but not nearly as much in the very steep categories. A lot of the middle and the high.
One quick thing, I just want to find this, on the trees, you mentioned the condition of the trees. That's not mentioned in the application form itself, is it somewhere else? Because this is just a documentation of the trees that are tagged, but did not show the condition.
So the arborist, the only condition issue, the arborist gave us a printout of the trees that we did submit, and there were 4 of them that are dead, and the arborist noted that. Other than that, the arborist didn't separately identify
So we can presume they,
condition.
other than those 4, that these are in good condition or healthy or whatever.
That's the assumption that we are working on.
Okay, fine.
And we're not trying to take credit for them not being
Right, okay.
in that
I
credit.
just wanted to make sure, because I didn't see the condition.
Mike, do you have any separate documentation from the arborist about the condition of each individual tree?
Only the trees that were dead were what you marked, everything else you gave a full value to.
Okay.
Are those the ones here, like 82, 19, 62, 63? Looks like some, well,
Se-
I'm not quite sure
73 to
what.
70, 73 to 76 were the trees that are dead
Okay.
on that list. If you wanna know specifically the sizes of those, I have that.
We have that on this list here.
You do,
That's part of the application.
it is. And then we are, even though we have a few more trees than were originally approved, we have slightly less DBH inches that are being removed. I mean, it's really in the neighborhood of 26 inches less, which is not that significant, but we're still, again, we're kind of in the same ballpark, not significantly more than what was proposed previously. This is the steep slopes plan that's been revised. So again, we have some increase in steep slopes disturbance in the 15 to 25% category. Last month, we reported that it was over 27,000 square feet more, actually over 28,000 square feet more, but in the refinements, when we broke it down by type and category, we're actually not nearly, I mean, the total was close to 6,600 more. We're actually now at about 2,400 more in that category, but we are less in the very steep slope, 25 to 35, and in the extremely steep slope, greater than 35. And in the extremely steep slope, it's the disturbance is only associated with the expansion area and construction coming down that hillside in order to be able to install the piping for that. So we have been able to reduce our extremely steep slopes disturbance and a very steep slope disturbance once we do that analysis. And then we did look at the cut and fill as well. So Mike, do we have?
Do you know what the width of the trails or the areas that you're using to access the various septic areas?
Yeah, they're about 10 feet wide.
Okay, the question I had is it necessary to be that wide? And then the other issue is, it looks like they're very straight and therefore the trees are.
I wanna make sure that that's recorded. We don't think it's necessary to be that wide, but the esteemed town engineer insisted that we consider that width.
They originally had like 2.5 feet.
Right, I mean, we're gonna be as narrow and as tight as
Original plan,
possible.
Robert, showed the clearing area to access was about 25 feet. They came in at 2.5 and I wasn't too happy to see that.
Well, the issue we raised is it impacts your steep slopes, it impacts your trees, and to the extent
So
we can
we
avoid.
thought
a reasonable
10
one
was
is 10 feet.
Like
was
a good
reasonable,
compromise.
and
For the
if they could
equipment.
do less, we would appreciate it.
And we talked about using the anti-tracking pads, and I know that there's disturbance associated with that, but the hope is that that will be less disturbance than if you didn't use the pads. We know we have to restore under those areas.
Right.
We calculated it, we kind of looked at the worst case scenario, and the thought was that 10 feet wide for the trench would be the worst case scenario, but we don't anticipate that it's actually gonna need to be that wide. And I think the point is that staff wanted us to make sure that we were making a fair comparison as opposed to using a very narrow, right, a very
We're gonna
narrow
walk it
path
with
just
it
to come
over.
in at certain numbers.
No, actually, I looked at other applications that we've done in the past and we were kind of consistent with a minimum of like 10 feet. 8 to 10 feet, which is reasonable.
So,
But even within that 10-foot area, I defer to Dennis on this, is it not possible that we can wind around in here to avoid the trees and still the trees aren't lost?
It's not gonna be a linear.
Yeah.
I don't know about what type of operators licenses are those, you know, I mean, everybody has different abilities as to, you know, I mean, between the slopes and the trees. Anybody who drives any equipment on this site, it's, you know, gonna be a bit of
he's gotta
an
be
exercise.
a real cowboy.
Yeah, so, you know, I understandably, I know when we talked about it, it's like, yeah, there has to be some degree of sort of maneuverability and variability just to sort
To
of
avoid the
account for
trees.
that, yeah.
I mean, they show it as a linear line.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Yeah.
It's gonna meander to get around the trees, obviously.
If you can, I mean.
If you can, and you don't wanna
Yeah.
take down the trees to begin with.
So-
And, you know, courtesy of the site probably laying as long as it has, I mean, there might have some advantages to, reason some of those trees are not on the application is because they're already in a horizontal position, you know, so there is some of that on the site as well, so removal of that, which are not
You should
part
just have fair and good, not horizontal.
of our code, exactly. You know,
Those are the
going out
special-
from the room, so-
You're just sleeping.
There's a new thing on our application forms, the trees that are horizontal.
Please note the position of.
I could just hear, by the way, I could just hear Henry on this, because this was always one of his favorite things, trees.
This is an architectural design.
Oh, yes.
He used to like to tell the story when he was before the ARB, this is Henry Hockerman. He used to like to tell the story when he was before the ARB that the chairman at the time said that he didn't like the front entrance or whatever, and so Henry said, well, when you come to my house, come around the back. That was his mitigation in this solution.
And the door will be locked.
Okay, so this is a worst case scenario then?
It is, and I think the intent was so that we didn't understate, we didn't try to finagle the numbers just to come in at a certain level. The staff wanted us to give a fair representation of what
Well,
might be
not this time,
necessary.
the first time.
So, I'd just like to, you're going to, at some point, maybe have to, service this line or do some repairs or?
Yes.
Right? So how do you plan to get, after it's installed, how do you plan to get, it'd be good to see this plan.
Yes, and we're
That's fine,
just
thank
pulling
you.
it up, yep.
How do you plan to get down there? Would you have to come up from
That's fine.
Hollow Ridge Road, from below? From below and come up into it?
So John, the question is access to
Is that
service the line.
Is that as fine? Yeah, it's just really dark. So you can blow it up right in here, you can see that. Because you've got a big fill slope here. Well, it's all black there.
Yeah, we were into.
But this is on a pad you created to the left.
Yep.
And up. Would be good. That's fine, it'll just go up a little bit. Scroll up. Good. A little bit more. Well, we can't see over here, but I think we know what's over here, right?
Can I say one thing about that? Now, that's the thing the county looks at. You can correct me on it, right, because you know about this too as well. If there's gonna be a considerable amount of fill, and it's gonna be very tough to access after the house is built.
Yeah, there it
It
is.
looks at that, and they can deny the waiver based on those reasons, right? John?
Yeah, but the access is really from the road down below.
Well, let me ask.
Why go through the rear yard?
You
Well,
think they would do
The
that?
septic is 50 feet off the existing road.
I just wanted to know whether you can go from the road to this location. Is there a wetland or is there a conservation area or anything?
No.
I defer to Dennis on that, but if they wanna do it, then the only thing they would need to get basically is
Drainage,
basically a street opening permit if they're gonna be coming off the road.
And that's,
As far as permits,
and that's the expansion area.
that's the expansion area
Yeah.
as well.
If the primary system ever fails in the
Right.
future.
And so if the primary system ever fails and you have to build this one, you have to service it. And you're saying you'd come from the road.
I would definitely build it from the road.
You would be okay to come up from the road, it'd be okay to do
Absolutely.
that. But, and then if you needed to service the line itself,
From
you
the
just
road also?
work up from the road, up to the base of the,
Absolutely.
okay.
There is also access around I believe there's about 16 feet between the garage and the toe slope on the side of the house to come in this location.
Over here.
Yeah,
Come around
if you needed to come in the back.
Okay.
So there's ways to access it.
Oh, yeah, everything's accessible.
Which is why you have confidence that we'll be able to get the fill waiver, because it's not an inaccessible area.
They just don't issue it until the final certification is when they issue it.
Right.
We see no issue with, I don't think anybody wants to
And
cut
you've
those trees down.
obtained them in the past. in your
Oh,
experience.
absolutely. It's pretty standard practice with the health department today.
Did we ask the question, why the upper one is the primary, because that's a force main, and the lower one is not?
Because of the disturbance on the steep slopes. disturbance down
Long
by the disturbance road,
to
we
get down.
didn't think it was wise to.
But you have this disturbance all the way down to here.
But it's 2.5 foot trench with a 4-inch pipe in it. 3 to 4 feet below grade. It's not gonna be a major.
But so's this.
It's, majority of the steep slopes and the extreme steep slopes are on that hillside.
And wasn't there an issue down here with a setback or something?
Yeah, wetland, isn't it?
There is.
Yeah, there was something, I thought.
Yeah,
That's what I had to
fit
break,
both.
that's what I had to break
They
them
had to
up.
break it up, the
Yeah.
primary and the
they
secondary,
usually
because
had
there's not
both
enough.
up front.
Yeah, that's why we couldn't put, it was originally all approved down below.
In one spot.
When the curtain drain for the roadway was installed.
It pushed into you.
It pushed us back
Right.
about 50 feet.
Okay.
We didn't have available area for the
Yours truly had to put that in, because there was a lot of water during construction, and it was coming on the road. It's the only practice.
Caused a lot of problems on this
What
project.
you did, Bob.
I admit it, I mean, I was here that, yes.
It's a night of confessions.
Right? Like, listen to
I have a
this.
lot of witnesses.
You are being recorded.
I think I said it last time.
How many copies did you want, Joe?
I think John mentioned it last time.
I think it's a better plan with the primary systems up above, because we don't have to disturb the hillside,
Right.
we don't
Upon
have
better
to
design.
disturb anything down by the road.
Right.
So that, the whole area along the road remains natural.
Okay.
You just gotta pump it,
Yeah, we pump it, and it's not a big deal.
which isn't a big deal.
Well, to the pump hills, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
not a
backup
big
pump,
Yeah, a
the
couple
generator.
cleanouts, right?
That's right, it's standard with no breakdown.
And it's a split system and a split field, I just wondered if DEP would have a problem with that, but I guess not.
No, they've actually are reviewing it right now.
Yeah, okay,
The
fair enough.
department's reviewed it.
Okay.
And I think you mentioned last time that the perk was actually better up there than down low
It
too.
was a smaller system. Because of the perk. I think it's a better plan. Thank you.
Better lucky than good sometimes.
So, everybody's getting giddy. Cut and fill plan you asked us to provide, we had not really discussed this, we talked about it conceptually last time, but we hadn't really talked about
Right.
any details, so this is the cut and fill plan. And bottom line is, it's pretty balanced. We do have some excess fill that we're gonna have to bring on, but it's gonna be largely in connection with building the expansion area, if that ever becomes necessary. So, that was the impact, and we had not provided this kind of detail last time around, so I just wanted to point out that we had that. And then the last thing that was new, if you will, in our submission is we had talked last time about retaining wall. And we did a retaining wall study. I can just get back to my plans here. Right, it's in this one, right? No, this is John's plan too, so. That was open there at the time. Let me locate it. This is a separate plan that we submitted, not in our plan set, but just an analysis of the use of retaining walls and what impact that could have in trying to see if there was any reduction in disturbance. As soon as we get it up.
What sheet number are we gonna be looking at?
So it's a separate sheet it's SK1, it's not bound in, it was separately
Is this,
attached.
it's, this one's on smaller.
This guy right here,
Remember that?
well, about 17.
Yep, there you go. So what we have on this plan is, and I'll just summarize it, and then people who really know what they're talking about can address it, but there's a retaining wall right along here on the south side of the house. The idea was to set it back about 16 feet off of the house itself, and it's behind the garage as well. And to give a little bit of area, because we would have to build a drainage swale, we'd have to make sure that we included some a drainage swale in that area to handle runoff. The analysis, bottom line was that by the time you cut back in order to be able to stabilize that that retaining wall, we are at about the same area of disturbance as we would have been with the grading that we're proposing. And the wall really just allows the grade to stay the same beyond the wall, south of the wall, not so much avoiding the grading that would be necessary to construct the house and the area around the house. So we really didn't see any great savings in the use of the retaining walls,
Okay,
but that was that analysis.
well, thanks for doing that.
So that was our new information. We responded to all of the comments in a written submission. Some of them came from CalArts Sessions, some of them are notes on plans or whatever. There are a few more things that we need to tie up and include some additional notes. We need to make sure that we have the testing done in the field, things of that nature, nothing that I don't think we can comply with. We did correct the calculation, the development coverage calculation to reflect the proper accounting for the common driveway. And we are actually a few square feet below the approved development coverage at 115% or 1.15 when you calculate it. So I think we're at like 1.09 of the development coverage with what we're proposing here. And again, I mean, this is the full build out. I mean, this includes the pool and patios and everything, so we think it's a realistic reflection of what people would want to see on the site. People who own it.
Is there a specific owner on this one at this point?
No, not at this point.
Okay. All right, Sabrina, do you wanna go through any?
Most of my
additional
comments
notes?
have been answered, it's a type 2 under secra, and, I think that if the board agrees, I would support sending them to public hearing.
Okay. Bob, you had some comments?
Yes, basically, they should provide pre-treatment for the water quality, which they didn't do where the P is 2.8, because it's in the, piece of custom watershed, that's ST1. The deep test should be done in accordance with the Appendix D of the DEC manual. I'm not crazy about how they do the testing for the perk, so I'm gonna refer to the Westchester County Best Management Practices Manual for stormwater runoff to do the percolation rates. I think they're a lot more conservative, and I think they did a much better job of the numbers when they did their research on it, so that's ST3. ST4, it's more than 5,000 square feet of disturbance, so they need a acknowledgement letter from DEC. General comment 1, I had some comments on the driveway. I still prefer them, they should be 25, that's a standard we use all the time. So I went through the details on these things, A, B, C, D, E, and F. With all due respect to architects, I would prefer, in my opinion, that a licensed professional engineer do the profiles. I put that on F. G2, based on the review of the submitted steep slopes, it needs planning board approval, that would be the approving authority. And on G3, clearly indicate the existing proposed water service line along the existing asphalt driveway, which leads out to the roadway. I would recommend that you contact John Nate, have a member scope and show that out there as well, because I believe it's gonna need a meter pit. And G4, there's just general notes regarding fill that may be drawn on site.
Bob, what is C and D? C and D debris?
Construction and demolition.
Material, yeah, I mean, you wanna make certain that the material they bring in is not contaminated.
Clean.
We're not bringing in any material.
Okay.
Site, it's about this project. And we
We're done.
performed the testing with your office. It's all done. We did it, I think, the week before last.
Okay,
So
and you're gonna
stormwater
use
testing is done.
the old Westchester County EMP to get the perk rates?
Yeah, that's all.
Very good. Okay, great.
Taken care of. We will isolate, as you know, we're holding the full 100-year storm for these infiltrators. So we got plenty of volume, so I'll just isolate the pre-treatment.
For the water quality.
Yeah, we'll isolate, we'll divert to the main system
Okay,
that
great.
fills up. I'll handle that in the plan.
The water information.
We have a call into the water department, we're waiting for a response. We will M-scope it, we will put the meter in.
Right, because the DPW does have a specific standard for the water meter pit that you
Right,
need.
we'll
And you
comply.
might wanna get it and show it on the plan as well.
We will. And well, and Steve asked us to prepare the driveway profile for
And
it.
you
So
can just
we'll do that.
make it a more legible scale, all due respect, it's kind of small, I can't really see what's going on.
No problem.
So we'll
Thank you.
provide that.
So
I'll
we're
think that we
taking
can
care
do.
of everything in your.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, Dennis, you had some comments with regard to the tree mitigation? I don't know if you finished it or you're still working on it?
No, just being able now to receive what we received, I'm now able to go on site and do a better job of correlating as to what you're talking about. The cultural archaeological is just, it's more administrative, but to me, there is a difference between checking a box or not checking a box, yes or no. That's, just sort of to make aware of, that obviously there's some sensitivity that historically, and I may still exist in some way, not necessarily on this lot, but with respect to the subdivision, so that's just a continuity thing that I think you would wanna carry through, and so then on that subject, with respect to the wetlands, this issue's never going to be 100% confirmed or resolved unless someone is able to access the property of the, we'll say, linear feature that we're talking about. So, sort of to eliminate potential, well, my view from the road, I think this, well, my view from the road, I think that, and, I think moving forward, there's a reasonable approach whereby we can come to an agreement as to what a reasonable measuring point would be, based on what it likely is now or will become, based on that, I guess going back to the original plan, some of that, then, me and Mr. Keller went over this earlier, that, how other lots were constructed, there was obviously a former basin that was built there, and then that conveyance, and this happens all the time on construction site, when you don't abandon such things properly, they can develop into what you would now call regulated, either because it's become a wetland or a water course or whatever. So I think, to be fair, I think it does represent, my term was a contiguous conveyance to connect to something that is regulated by DEP, so we can sort of visually agree on a spot where we should measure from 150 feet from that feature and not where necessarily DEP did, but maybe to avoid using some of the W words, so as not to raise concern of, say, the property owner, whereby we're calling it a wetland based on standing on a roadway and looking at a Westchester GIS map. That seems reasonable. Because I was debating this with Bob and Tom this morning, I said, you also get put in a position whereby if you call it something without confirmation, and then this person wants to apply 3 months later, and now you have 2 applications in with 2 different, that's not gonna go well either, so to try to reasonably address sort of our code and reasonably address, what the protection would be and where it would be on site, I think we can come to an agreement on that.
Okay.
So, but it would result in the 150-foot buffer line being adjusted from the original submission. It would push it to some of the expansion area.
Okay.
No, I don't think so.
Not into the expansion area.
Oh, onto the property.
Onto the property, but not into, right,
Oh,
not
right.
into the
We
expansion.
we believe the setback is not gonna impact our proposal.
No matter what? Okay.
So we'll label it contiguous
Conveyance.
conveyance.
Contiguous conveyance to a
Connecting,
intimate more
yeah.
regulated DEP.
3 Cs, contiguous conveyance connecting DEP designated,
Intimate water.
yeah, right.
So it'll be on there, the information will be there, but we have confirmed that it will not throw off a 150-foot buffer into our expansion area. So we'll still be okay with that septic expansion area as it's proposed.
Okay, great. Any questions, board members? Comments, questions on this at this point? Good. Is there a motion to move this forward to public hearing on when? When does it look? February.
Well, your first meeting in January is 14th, what's the deadline for?
Our first meeting's the 7th, isn't it? And then the 21st?
It's 7 and 21.
Yeah, 7/20, I'd say it's 21, because we're probably past the deadline of the
We
7th.
may be.
I think we are, it's 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a few weeks, fast.
So the 21st, there it is.
15 and 7 is 22.
It's the 16th, it was yesterday.
There you
God
go.
bless you. Bless you.
So public hearing for the 21st.
Yep, okay.
I go in pairs.
Sabrina, what's the submission deadline for the 21st?
What is the deadline?
It is December 23rd.
Can you,
That's Monday.
can you get revised plans? Do you have revised plans?
Driveway profile by Monday and all Bob's comments and everything. Notes, you have to add notes to the plan. You can do by
The
Monday.
notes are on
Bob has some added ones.
And you have
Nope, no
to
problem.
revise that calculation.
Yes, we've done it in turn, we've
I
already
did it
done it.
already.
Yeah, we didn't want to submit it, but we made sure.
I'm glad you didn't, thank you.
Yeah.
Alright, so by Monday.
Okay, so our goal is if we're able to submit by Monday, then we'll be on for January 21st. Please schedule us for that. If there's a reason that we can't, then it would be pushed over to the first meeting in February.
Which is the
Yeah, the
fourth.
4th.
Yep.
And that deadline also, 13th.
What's the deadline for 2/4?
Deadline is January 13th.
Okay, great. We're
Okay.
gonna shoot for the December 23rd.
Okay.
Great,
Great.
thank you. Have a good
Thanks, everyone.
holiday.
You too.
Happy New Year.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Yep.
Merry Christmas.
Okay, we have a couple of other quick items, I think, I hope.
What's wrong?
First is a public hearing, so there is an adjournment of the public hearing for 767 King Street LLC, Chiselhurst subdivision lot 6. Jennifer, do we have to do anything other than just say we're just adjourning it?
Just adjourn it to,
No
looks like
motions?
they're requesting to February 4th.
Yeah. Okay. We have a request for an extension of approval on the Monaco Realty. Again, I guess the applicant's indicating he's having problems with DOT.
You let me know that last time I did it.
Any issues with that? You're okay with it?
didn't know?
If not, is there a motion to grant the extension for Monaco Realty?
Motion.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
We have our meeting schedule set forth here. Did we actually adopt this with a motion or all that kind of stuff?
You haven't.
Well, we've never done that before, right?
No, just,
Anyway, there it is.
you've approved it.
Yeah,
You have approved it.
I changed it because we were gonna meet on the 1st of September before Labor Day. I said, we can't possibly do that, so we pushed it back. So Felicia and I worked on that one to extend our summer vacation. This is a very, very long summer. Memorial Day's early and Labor Day's late, so it's 108 days, so enjoy the summer season.
Yeah.
Did not want it disrupted by a planning board meeting. Good point. Minutes. November 6th. Meeting.
I gave some minor comments.
I have yours.
Okay.
On the 6th,
Just minor
Yes.
wordsmithing?
as amended, we have an as amended for the
Okay.
6th.
I'll give you mine. Okay.
Let's,
Any substantive issues, questions, problems on minutes of November 6th?
nope.
So as they will be amended, is there a motion to adopt them?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We have the minutes of November 19,
As amended, the town board meeting or the planning board?
the planning board,
Okay.
and then the joint is later.
Couple of buildings.
I have a question on page 5 of 6.
It's submitted.
Which, when is Starbucks gonna start operation? I mean, it's been,
It was supposed to be today, wasn't it?
Was
Last I
it?
heard- Last I heard was today.
and I know as of
They were supposed to be
yesterday.
last week, but they were turned down because they did not have hot water because Con Ed did not hook up the gas.
Oh, well, of course.
Problem.
It's an extra cost. So,
So that's a Con Ed issue.
should they be put in this? Because that's gonna be another TCO or whatever?
No.
Now, the
That
CC, we
happened.
did this before and then the approvals came in on the.
Odd minutes, I
Yeah,
got it.
afterwards.
All right.
Minutes, you can't change them.
Yeah, sure you can, but not that grossly.
I had a couple of things on page 4, minor wordsmithing. Line 61, Ms. Crespi asked for the number of school children in the cupola building.
Because with just one P.
Page 4, 61.
No, I think this.
And then Ledgewood is Ledgewood Commons, just, that's the full name of the development.
Ledgewood Commons,
Yeah.
okay.
And I think on line 53 on page 3, it's December 3rd, not November 3rd.
I'm sorry, line, page 3,
Yeah.
line 56, you said?
No, it's December.
No, we didn't meet.
It was November. What was the,
But this was a November 19th,
oh, so it would be,
December 3rd. We would like to stay on the agenda for December 3rd.
yes,
Right.
You got it.
yes.
Okay.
I'll give you the receipt.
What page
Okay.
was it? Oh, you're gonna give it to her?
Yeah.
December 3rd.
So, and then we have, is there a motion then to adopt the minutes as amended?
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
And we have the joint meeting, the minutes of November 19.
Page 215, which is the second page of the memo here, line 52. Just 215, fine.
Oh,
God, I wrote it
215.
down, do.
Yeah, no, he's correct.
Yeah.
They're
let's-
numbered up at the top.
Let's say that too.
Line 52 is a minor thing, but halfway in the
Oh, okay.
line, it should be not capitalized. Because it's a semicolon. Restricted.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I don't mean to disturb your meeting, I'm just looking for the police precinct.
Downstairs.
Downstairs.
Yeah, right around the corner.
Just go right down the steps.
Right around there.
Okay, thank you.
You'll find it
got
right
it.
there.
I'd add on line 52, Tom, if you don't mind, after the word build the whole thing.
What page?
52. Or no, 952.
Okay. Okay, as amended, is there a motion to adopt the minutes of the joint meeting on November 19?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
You know, these minutes are coming so fast and furious, it's like, I feel like we haven't even left the meeting yet.
Is that a good feeling or a no?
No, it's really bad.
It's a continuum.
Yeah, it's like it never ends.
Well, that's because Felicia types very fast.
Types fast.
Yes.
Do we need a motion on these lemon signing?
Yeah, you need to
Because, okay,
be approved to sign.
oh, they're not here?
You're right, you
Oh,
have
they
it.
are,
You're right.
okay, I'm sorry. This is,
We don't need anything, I'll just sign them.
No.
You can just sign them.
Yeah, okay.
I prepared my memos and gave them.
Yeah.
yeah,
So, okay.
this is the first one, and then this is.
So is there a motion to close the meeting with, we have to do anything for this, Jennifer?
No, this is
Okay.
the,
Linen.
Signing.
one,
You
yeah,
got a
it was
couple
already
minutes.
authorized
Okay.
outside the meeting.
So,
I figured I'd give them to you now since.
yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
that's terrific. So, other than having a great holiday, we'll miss Sheila.
Yes, we
as
will.
she
Miss you.
somehow escapes under her own surveillance somehow. Anyway, we'll miss you, and anyone
And
else,
the feeling is
happy
mutual.
holidays, we'll see you next year and all that good stuff. Maybe a
Do we have
Tom's affair.
someone else in mind?
I'm sorry.
I have,
I was, so therefore I was thinking if Sheila has, remorse, can we have her come back for a couple of weeks or?
I tried remorse, I tried. But, there's 3 more of you guys, let's go. I gave it my best shot.
No doubt.
Is there a motion to close the meeting?
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
This is a vacation.